Well, hello, my spookies. I hope you're doing well on this first Friday in April. And I hope you're ready to enjoy quite the monstrous compilation, both figuratively and very literally. We've gathered some of the finest examples of weekly spooky stories all about the, well, not so great outdoors. Those things that lurk in the woods. Or maybe it's just in your mind. Well, the only way to find out is to give it a listen. So, get yourself cozy because this is a full-blown hike through the terror of nature. And remember, if you love what we're doing here at Weekly Spooky and want to support us, head to weeklyspooky.com where there's merchandise, a Patreon, and so much more. But now, my friends, it's time to kick it all off by heading to the Great White North. Stalk by Mike Eshkui. I'm bored, lonely, and horny. This is not exactly a great combination for an exciting reading week. The exceptional and brilliant life of me, Joshua Fox, or Foxy to most of my friends. I wish the nickname suggested more success with the ladies, but, well, let's say it's been a long, dry summer, and fuck if I'm not thirsty. Canadian Thanksgiving, the less cool cousin of American Thanksgiving, happens in October, but hey, it's reading week, so it kinda works out. I'm coming home to my old stomping grounds from being away in the big city of Toronto. It'll be a week of getting together with some friends, playing some Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe putting on the skates for a few games of beer league hockey with the boys. Maybe I was expecting college to be like in the movies and ladies would be throwing themselves at me. I am somehow getting the idea that the sexy comedies of the 80s might have lied to me. There was a distinct lack of panty raids, and it was more study your ass off and get your homework done than endless fun. I'm lucky that I got my college education paid for courtesy of the Ontario government and a summer of manning a hot dog cart at the Blue Jays games. The drive home up Highway 6 was, as always, long, boring, and, well, if you've never seen a cow, then hold on to your butts because you are in for a treat. I parked my ass at my parents' house in Owen Sound and hoped that this week doesn't suck. My mom and dad have taken off to somewhere warm, sunny, and probably filled with conservative nut jobs like Florida. Come to think of it, maybe Owen Sound and Florida have a lot in common, just with less alligators on meth. Then again, I laughed at my own stupid thoughts and continued driving. Fortunately, Foxy wasn't totally without a clue or a plan for the week ahead, in some ways. There is this cool thing called the internet. Heard of it? Of course you have. All the debauchery and raunchy shit you can imagine, and all available at the click of a mouse. Kinda figured the boys might blow me off for the week with work, girlfriends, and kids, so I had to come up with a plan B. What's plan B, you ask? Internet hookups. Yeah, I know. Fuck sexy MILFs in your area right now. Just pay $9.99 and enter your major credit card. Nah, fuck that. I tried the sensitive approach and cast a wide net and tried the college dating website scene, and I'll see what happens when I cast a line. Before leaving my dorm, I fired up the old laptop and sent off a few messages to some girls up in the area. I knew a few of them from going to high school, and some I knew by reputation alone. I kinda had a feeling that my odds of success weren't great, but hey, as a great wise man once said, you can't score if you don't take a shot, right? Now, wait, you're thinking, am I really this lonely and desperate? Yes and no. Before I left for school, I did have a girl I was going steady with, but, well, it didn't work out. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was me. Maybe I shouldn't have tried to fuck her best friend Courtney. Maybe. TLDR, I'm an idiot and got what I deserved. However, who says that good guys don't get a second chance? Am I a good guy? Well, I'm not Hitler. That has to count for something. Coming into Owen Sound was something that I always looked forward to. The lovely fall colors of the trees and the big hill coming into the downtown. Sure, this place sucked to grow up in, but I'll be damned if it wasn't a gorgeous place to look at for a little while. I drove up to my parents' house on the west side of town by the old Blockbuster and unloaded my backpack and hockey bags. Walked into the old house that was clearly built before people knew what HVAC was and half-decent wiring. It's quiet here. Even the dog is gone. They almost never take that yappy thing with them on vacation. That's pretty weird. Guess the neighbors finally said, "Fuck you, your dog won't stop shitting on our lawn, so no, Bob and Linda, I won't look after your mutt." My room was just as I left it. It looked like a bomb went off in it. Dirty clothes, fast food wrappers, and I'm pretty sure a half-empty can of Red Bull stuffed up under my computer desk. Speaking of my computer, I fired up the old desktop that I didn't take with me to school. I logged on to a few of the college dating sites that I was on before I left and kinda hoped that I'd find someone to help take my mind off things. For a while. Seems like more than a few swiped away from yours truly, but hey, this is just separating the wheat from the chaff. The strong survive. Right? After sorting through like 20 messages and getting shot down almost consistently, a hit. I've never been so happy to see a blinking notification on a website that wasn't OnlyFans. Clicked that so fast that I thought the mouse would disintegrate in my hands. It was from Tracy Kidd. Totally out of my league. Totally not into me. Yet. "Hey Josh, glad to hear you're coming back to town for a week. When was the last time I saw you? Was it the baseball tourney in Sauble Beach or at Jean's party in Chesley? It's been way too long. I was totally surprised to hear from you though. Such a pleasant surprise. Sorry to hear that your friends ditched you for the week or likely will. That totally sucks." Blah, blah, get on with it. But I kept reading with anticipation as this could go my way, or I'm spending my week with a jar of Vaseline and Pornhub. So I'm stuck this week by myself too, and I was wondering if you'd like to get together. No pressure or anything. I have to close my parents' cottage for the winter and I could totally use a big strong man to help me out. Well, more like I'd rather not be alone in a giant house by myself for a week. So, tell you what, why don't you come up when you're here, and we'll get together, have a few laughs, go in the hot tub and drink what's left in the liquor cabinet. Now this is what I am talking about! I texted her so fast, and after literally a few seconds, she replied back. Holy shit! She gave me a winky face emoji and said she'd be available later tonight. I texted back and asked for the address, but tried to play it cool. Pretty sure I looked dumb as hell, but it's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out. Got the address. I had a vague idea on where it was. Sauble Beach. It sounded like it was close to Saugeen First Nation territory. The Indian reservation. I'd been there a few times for hockey and had a few friends from there. Good guys, def the kind of people you want backing you in a fight. You don't fuck with res kids. Had an idea that kid was Ojibwe, but didn't want to ask. It's cool, though. Native girls have the most intense dark eyes and that amazing black hair. I knew Tracy had a rep, but it was well earned. She didn't take any crap from any of her boyfriends, so she had that tough girl air about her. She was confident, undeniably sexy, but so far out of my league it was like a 10-year-old kid playing in the NHL. With a broken arm. I can't deny that I'd love to have a face-off with her and jersey her if you catch my drift. Still, she responded to me, so if I didn't have a shot, then she wouldn't have answered me. Maybe this reading week is gonna work out after all. Get together with a pretty girl, fuck her brains out, and return back to the dorms with an awesome story. I could also totally brag to my buddies Ryan and Dylan how I got laid and they decided to ditch me for things like jobs and beer league. Losers. I texted her back and said I'd take a quick shower and grab some supplies and head up her way within the hour. It was late afternoon, but I'd still make it up there before it got too dark, and then the real fun began. I got in the shower and tried to imagine all the ways that I'd be all Mr. Super Sexy and Smooth Operator. Something felt kinda off as I got out of the bathroom, though. It kinda felt like someone was watching me. It only happened for a few seconds, but for a moment or two, I swear I saw a pair of eyes dart by my bedroom window. That would be crazy because I was up on the 3rd floor. Maybe cut back on the Red Bulls before I leave for her place. Got my luggage together, some condoms I had stashed for just such an occasion, and a 6-pack of Canadian from the fridge. I'm sure Dad won't mind if I take a few beers to entertain a lady. Again, something seemed weird as I was just getting my keys off the kitchen table, and I looked out towards the back door. I swear I saw the biggest damn dog I'd ever seen, just peering in at me and looking at me. Now, who the hell let that monster off the leash? Should I call the cops or help someone find their dog? Well, if it's important enough, then someone will come looking, and I'm sure that Cujo, the giant dog, will find his way home. My car felt like something out of Fast and the Furious as I hit the gas and hit every single light out of town and up Highway 6 toward Sauble Beach. I cranked up the radio and started singing along badly to whatever was on. It frankly didn't matter. Tonight was gonna be great, and I wasn't gonna let anything spoil it. This fox was on the prowl, baby. Passed by a few small towns along the way to Sauble Beach. This place was world-renowned as a tourist destination, huge white sand beach, thriving beach community, and of course, racial tensions because, Northern Ontario. I mean, why do people gotta be shitheads? Everyone's shit stinks, so why can't we all just get along? Right? Right. Leave it to me. I'll solve all the world's problems like the fucking United Nations. The only part of the ride that wasn't full of fun and fantasy was still shaking that weird feeling of those eyes watching me. The main road into Sauble was quiet, like so quiet you could hear a mouse fart for miles. This place rolled up the sidewalks after Labor Day weekend, and it was just the locals left here till the winter comes for the snowmobile crowd. Everything was closed or being closed up, and the only thing open was a convenience store that sold stuff to tourists at inflated prices, and the locals knew better than to drive to Owen Sound. I used to spend a lot of summers here with the boys, and even my on and off girlfriends. We'd hang out by the giant sign at the beach entrance and walk downtown and not have a care in the world. Those summers were amazing, and I never wanted them to end. We'd usually rent a cottage a few times a summer along the beach, and it was nothing but parties, loud music, weed, and staying up all night playing poker or an old Nintendo till we passed out. My GPS started droning on its directions to get to Tracy's place. Where in the hell was it? Back roads, twists, and turns, and I don't even think I was anywhere near people at this point. If you lived back here, you either valued your privacy or had more money than sense to build this far back. It was dirt roads, trees, dense bush, and even an occasional swamp. Truly paradise. Come to think of it, the GPS lady sounded kinda hot. Wait, we are not fantasizing about fucking Skynet before Tracy, are we? We are. It's a new level of sadness, but that's okay. It'll be prime time soon enough. Finally, I found the address, and it was tucked back about as far as one could go without being totally off-grid. I think her neighbors must be easily 15 or 20 minutes away, and I haven't seen any cars pass me in at least that long. On the plus side, no one will hear her scream my name when we get down to it. I drove carefully along the dirt road, trying not to bottom out my car. I'm still paying this thing off, and the last thing I need is to take it in because I knocked off my muffler. Her cottage comes into view, and it's way bigger than I expected. Looks like someone built this place by hand, and they had amazing taste as well. 2 stories, big, glorious windows, and a gorgeous wraparound deck, and even a little swing set. This place was like something out of a TV show or a movie. I pulled up beside her pickup truck and started to get out when I noticed something as I opened the car door. What in the hell was that smell? It smelled like a wet dog mixed with something else. It almost smelled like rotten meat that had been left out in the sun for a few hours. You spend enough time in the woods and you know what trouble smells like. And this did not exactly scream friendly. Must be roadkill or something died in the woods nearby. I mean, there were bears, coyotes, and foxes around here. Probably safe to assume that I should get inside quickly. I'd rather not end up as something's dinner tonight. I probably taste great. One last thing to prepare. I sprayed a little bottle of Axe body spray on myself before I went up to the door. Might as well smell like desperation and a little bit of horniness in a can, right? I headed up the deck stairs and knocked on the big wooden door. I waited a moment or two and then knocked again, and nothing. Did I get the wrong house? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone to text her, but of course, no cell service. I'm pretty sure even if I got a bar of service out here, it would be a minor technological miracle. Maybe she was fucking with me. I mean, it's entirely possible. I started to walk back towards my car in defeat and shame when I heard a voice call out from an upstairs window. "Josh! Hold on a few. I'm just getting out of the shower. The door's unlocked. Head into the living room. I'll be down in a few." That was Tracy. I opened the door and walked into the cottage, and man, what a trip. This place was decked out in all sorts of things on the walls. There was a gigantic painting of a pack of wolves above a fireplace, and pictures of what I presumed were her family. They also had tons of handmade things that looked like they must have come from the reservation. I think I'd heard that her brother John was a big shot dancer in the powwow circuit. It's pretty badass looking, to be honest. I mean, I somehow managed to fuck up coloring books, so this was way beyond my skill level. I sat down on her sofa and just kept looking around the place, half being amazed by all the stuff, and the other time being kinda snoopy and way too curious. After about 10 minutes, I hear footsteps coming down the staircase behind me. I can't contain my excitement, and I spin around on the couch and try to look cool. It didn't work, as I turned around so fast that I almost fell off the couch. I looked up and saw Tracy Kidd for the first time since last summer. She looked gorgeous. Long black hair. Her makeup was done just right to make her eyes pop, and she wore a pair of gray sweatpants and a crop top black hoodie. She was beautiful. "Hey, Foxy, long time no see. Have any trouble finding the place?" she said in a playful tone. "Yeah, my GPS tried to take me into Lake Huron, but I got here all right." "Man, your folks certainly made sure this place would be the biggest pain in the ass for a pizza guy or Amazon to find. You'd be surprised how easily all the cousins find it after powwow, and John comes home for a few weeks," she laughed. "I'm glad I was able to come up. By the way, thanks for messaging me back, Trace. I needed a friendly face or two while I was home. I'm more than happy to help. I even brought up a few beers as well." "Well, aren't you a fucking gentleman?" she laughed. "Don't worry, I'm fully stocked out here as I gotta close this place up for the winter, and I'm not supposed to leave anything behind. My parents said, 'Do what you want, but make sure the locks are tight, the windows closed, and the power is off before Thanksgiving Monday.' I'm just glad to be out of the city for a few days, so anything you need, I got." I'll admit, it took a lot of restraint to not say anything stupid or push my luck too far before we even had a chance to get comfortable together. "Anything, huh? Well, That remains to be seen. Her voice and demeanor changed for just a second, and I think if I played my cards right, then I likely would not be sleeping on the sofa. I'm pretty handy and I can count to 10 without using my fingers, so that has to count for something. I joked back with her to see if I was gauging the room right. She smiled back at me, and it was the kind of look that suggested I could lower my defenses and see where things led, but slowly, and try to play 3D chess, as it were. Tracy sat down on the couch next to me, and we just caught up on old times and what we'd been up to since last summer. She was working for the Conservation Authority and doing some stuff for her brother, like helping him book gigs, so kinda like Showbiz meets Captain Planet. It did sound pretty cool if very busy and time-consuming. I told her that I was at Humber College for photography. I wanted to live my dream of being a sports photographer. Maybe someday work for the NHL or the Canadian Hockey League. As the night passed, we started developing into deeper topics, and it was actually pretty pleasant. She asked me why we never hung out more in high school. I always thought you were too cool for me. You always had a boyfriend, and let's be real, most of these guys make UFC fighters seem like cuddly little kittens in comparison. You could have just asked, Fox. You were a good guy, kind, and not too much of an asshole. I didn't care much for that Dylan friend of yours, but always thought you were all right. I remember the first time I saw you and your boyfriend fight at school. You punched him so hard when he laid his hands on you. It was like watching Wonder Woman come to life. It was pretty fucking awesome. Funnier when he begged you not to do it in front of his friends. Yeah, he had it coming. I dated a lot of jerks back then. I could handle myself, though. My grandmother taught me a lot of things. She taught me mostly to take shit from no man and to end it decisively. She looked at me differently when she said that to me. The air in the room seemed to shift, and it wasn't just idle chit-chat anymore. It was something more real. I'm sorry that you had to go through that, Trace. You deserve better. A lot better. Tracy inched closer to me on the couch and actually started to cuddle into me. I actually felt all my bravado and all my intent ooze away as she did. I was vulnerable, and so was she. This was the make it or break it moment. This is where I either have an amazing night or I fuck it up completely. I've been lonely for a while, Josh. Things got different after you left. She almost whispered it like it was a secret she wasn't supposed to tell anyone. What do you mean? What's wrong? I asked and genuinely meant it. The idea of getting laid kinda became secondary now. I mean, what if this was something else? What if this was one of those moments where something becomes really real? I know why you came here, but I'm not mad. Oh, fuck. No, it's fine. I wanted you to come. It's more than just a hookup, right? How do I answer this? Maybe I'll play honestly, because I don't know, she can lay me out cold and leave me for the bears outside to eat. I'll admit it, a lot has changed since I came here and actually started talking with you. It's one thing to have a hot girl answer you on a dating site, and another thing to have said hot girl invite you up to a cottage for a few days. I get the feeling that you've been really real with me, and I haven't had that since Melissa, my ex. The one you tried to cheat on. Yeah, I own that fuck up. I didn't expect to say that out loud, but it came so naturally. If I'm going to be present and here in the moment, then I better be on my best behavior. You're not a bad guy, Josh. I can smell it on you. Okay, that's a weird thing to say, but sure. That's just the body spray. I nervously laughed. She sat up and sat on my lap and looked deep into my eyes. She was a lot heavier than I expected to be, honestly. She was built like a tank. She didn't look this strong, but looks are deceiving. I'm pretty sure she could bench press me and not even break a sweat. No, Josh, it's perfectly fine. We all have needs, and so do I. It's nothing to be ashamed of. She touched the side of my face and traced a line from my hairline to my cheek and cupped my chin in her hand. Normally, this is where I'd get down to business and go to town, but here I was absolutely in her hands. I was her plaything, and she knew it. She had this animalistic power over me, and on one hand, it was kinda scary how much I knew she could overpower me, but I kinda wanted it that way. I looked back into her eyes, and there was something in there I didn't expect to see. I could see this primal hunger and this ferocity you see in a wild predator like a wolf or a lynx. This is a weird line between sexy as fuck and scary. I think I'm turned on, but also kinda terrified. What would you say to a little game? You win, you can have your way with me. And if I win, then I can do whatever I want to you. Okay, what do I have to do? Answer me honestly, and I'll know if you're lying, she said in a flirty but also serious tone. She pulled her hair back into a ponytail and didn't take her deep brown eyes off me. She was sizing me up in a way that I can't say I've ever seen outside of a nature documentary. Suddenly, I felt like a kitten trapped in a cage with a lioness. This is either going to get kinky or weird. Probably both. Relax your body and let me guide you. I need you to trust me, Josh. She took my hands and placed them on her sides, and she kept eye contact with me. I relaxed as much as I could. I was a little hard because, well, I'm a guy. She smiled at me and winked, and then got serious again. Do you trust me, Josh? She took my hands and put them on her breasts, and kept her body taut against mine. Okay, this is going places. I do, I stammered out. Do you want me, Josh? I do. This is happening. Would you still want me if I told you a secret? Sure. I mean, it's not like you killed anybody, right? I could feel her body tense up as soon as I said that. And what if I did? Okay. Not sure I like where this is going. I don't think you're a murderer, kid. Tough as shit, but you're not a killer. Tracy took my hands and guided them to her face and held them against the side of her head, and we just held hands like that for a moment. There was a tenderness and a longing in this moment. I could feel my cheeks flush and my heart beating out of my chest like a jackhammer. What if you're wrong about me? Would you still want me? She relaxed our hands and leaned in to kiss me. I could feel her breath just as our lips were about to touch. And for a moment, it was like the first time I was with someone, and I totally forgot the peril I was likely in. Yes. Good, she whispered as she kissed me long and deep, passionately. This wasn't an I want to fuck you kiss. This was an I want you forever kind of kiss. Now you only have to do one more thing, and it's simple. I want you too, but you have to prove how strong and clever you are. Can you do that? At this moment, I'm pretty sure I would have sold meth to nuns. I can do that. I want you to play hide and seek with me for 10 minutes, and I'll give you a head start. Seriously? All I gotta do to sleep with this amazing, enchanting sexual goddess is play hide and seek for 10 minutes? This is gonna be so awesome. Okay, that's it? I laughed. That's it. I might suggest you start running now, though. What? Run? Why? This seems a little hardcore for foreplay, don't you think? I thought to myself. Tracy leaned in and kissed me again, and this time it almost felt sad. Like a goodbye, in a sense. She took herself off my body, off the couch, and stood up to her full height. If you're going to mate with me, then I need to know how strong and clever my pups will be. As soon as she said that, I thought I was going to shit my pants. This little 5'8" dark-skinned girl started to grow in front of me like something out of a nightmare. Her skin started to ripple, and a rough dark brown fur emerged like a wave. Her features twisted and snapped like muscles and bone snapping into new shapes. The face of Tracy Kidd was replaced by a long, wolf-like snout filled with sharp, unforgiving teeth. Those once kind hands shaped into impossibly long claws that scraped the hardwood floor beneath her. She towered over me at easily 9 feet tall. A rough, almost unrecognizable voice growled out of her horrifying visage. "I'm going to count to 30, and then, if you can survive for 10 minutes, I'm all yours." I screamed and screamed till my voice was hoarse, and I started to run in any direction but where I was. Tracy Kidd was a fucking werewolf? Fuck, I gotta run! I threw open the front door and tripped down the stairs as I went and landed hard on the grass out front and felt the wind get knocked out of me. I felt my car keys jab into my leg, and Jesus Christ, did that hurt. I started stumbling towards my car and thought about how the hell I was going to get out of here when I didn't even know where here was in this dark. It was so pitch black, and her porch lights were off. I struggled to get my car keys in the lock. They wouldn't turn. I kept turning the keys, but the door wouldn't open. Shit, I must have bent the key when I fell. Fuck! I'm gonna die here, aren't I? I felt beads of sweat run down my face and start to sting my eyes. Panic had gripped my entire body. This was it, wasn't it? This is where it all ends for me. I started running down the dirt laneway towards what I assumed was the main road that I had came in on. I didn't even look back as I kept focusing on putting one foot in front of the other and doing my best to keep my forward momentum going. I just wanted to get with a girl this week. I just wanted to get laid. Right now, I just want to live to see tomorrow. Fuck, I'll take surviving the next hour if it means I can keep breathing. I kept running further and further into the darkness, and eventually the lights from Tracy's cottage could barely be seen because of the thick mess of pine trees. Looking around for anywhere to hide, or at least a place to gather myself for a second and to catch my breath. I'm not exactly in the worst of shape, but I could feel my legs start to turn to jelly and each breath start to burn as I gasped for air. Peeking off the laneway, I started dashing into the woods, and when I finally got into an area too dense to run, I started to slow down and carefully walk so as not to make too much noise. I couldn't hear anything except the faint sounds of a distant owl and the lapping of some nearby body of water. It's too quiet out here, and all I can truly hear is the blood pumping in my ears. I have a lot to be sorry for if this is where it all ends tonight. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I know you wanted me to go off to school like my sister and become a doctor, but I wasn't smart enough. I'm mostly sorry to my ex-girlfriend, Melissa. You didn't deserve what I tried to do to you. I thought I was something special because someone else besides you took a liking to me, and I let it go to my head. I fucked up, and I made a lot of people unhappy in my life. Maybe I deserve to be torn apart by this creature, or turned into a weird breeding thing for her. I probably deserve this. I leaned back against a tree and let out a sigh, and just looked up at the sky for a second. I don't know how long it's been since I ran from the house. Maybe 5 minutes, and that's probably being generous. I could smell that rotting flesh again. Shit. Suddenly something wet and heavy slammed into my chest and knocked me hard against the tree. Felt like it cracked a rib or 10. I crumbled into a heap at the base of the tree and was instantly dazed. I tried to keep from passing out from the pain and keep focused enough to get my wits about me. I opened my eyes, and I instantly regretted that decision. Once again, I found myself face to face with something that shouldn't exist, yet here it was, right here in front of me. There was enough pale light cast from the overhead moon that I could see the face of the creature looking right into my soul. Tracy, or whatever she was, kept inching closer to me, with her gigantic mouth, drooling. Her spit glistened in the moonlight like dew. Okay, this was really it. Tracy, if you're gonna kill me, make it quick, and please don't make my mom and dad have to worry that I disappeared. Give them something to bury, I croaked out in a weak voice. The werewolf stood up to its full height and cocked its head and looked at me. I looked up into the eyes of the creature, and suddenly, they weren't the eyes of a monster. They were Tracy Kidd's eyes. Tracy's lupine form leaned down and moved closer to my body and nuzzled it like a dog would to an injured friend or owner. Her big wolf-like head nuzzled up against mine and touched the side of my face gently. This is not what I expected. Her form began to shift back into the 19-year-old native girl I had a crush on once. She was naked, but at that moment, it didn't matter. Josh, are you afraid to die? Yeah, I am. I don't want my parents to worry, or my sister. I'm sorry for a lot of things in my life. I'm sorry that I came up here looking to take advantage of you. I'm sorry for everything, I whispered quietly. I know you are. I can smell it on you. You're a lot of things, Joshua Fox, but you're not a bad guy. She reached out again with her hands and cupped mine in hers and touched my face. I'm sorry, Tracy. What would you say if I said I was still interested in you? Okay, I went from preparing to meet the Almighty to whatever this is. I'm confused. What do you mean? I didn't know how to process what exactly was happening at that moment. I'm lonely, Josh. I want to be with someone who can be honest like you are right now. What if I offered you a chance to be like me? Strong, powerful, and to be a part of something different? What exactly was Tracy asking me? She took back her left hand and extended one of her fingernails to an unnatural length and pointed it at me. Be with me, Josh. When we mate with another, we take on strong spiritual and personality traits from the partner. I want my pups to have that honesty and that vulnerability you showed tonight. You could have tried to fuck me and then left in the morning, but instead you chose to talk and open up. You went with plan B even though you didn't immediately mean to. Will I be just like you? Like a monster? Yes and no. I'll have to show you how to control your new life, and you'll be different from everyone else, but you'll meet others like me. It's not as scary as it sounds, trust me. I found out from my grandmother in high school. How did you think I got so strong? Will it hurt? Just for a minute. Tracy leaned in and pressed her naked body against mine, and I felt her fingernail cut deep across my back. Pain and fire seared across the wound, and I wanted to throw up, but couldn't. I immediately passed out. The next day I woke up next to Tracy in an unfamiliar bed, and all my wounds had healed. I felt weird, like everything was moving in slow motion, but I was hyper-aware of everything. I could hear birds and things that seemed miles away. I felt like I was stronger than I'd ever been in my life. I got up out of bed and noticed I was also naked. Oh, that's unexpected. Well, if I had any fun last night, it seems like I wasn't totally present for that little escapade. I passed by a mirror and noticed something different about myself. I had the same animalistic look in my own brown eyes that Tracy did when we were on the couch last night. Well, this is going to take some getting used to, isn't it? I used to work in a fire tower with a strange set of rules by Michael Kelso. It wasn't all that long ago when I worked as a park ranger in a fire tower. You'd think it would be an easy job. You'd be wrong. Once I found a strange list of rules, it was all downhill from there. Suffice it to say, I was lucky to get out with my life while still being a free man. There was an investigation into the matter, and I was questioned several times by the police, but they didn't want to hear the truth of the story. That something strange and supernatural happened that night in that fire tower. Unfortunately, one of my fellow rangers wasn't so lucky. But that is another story. I never went back to that tower, ever. I searched for a few weeks before finding a new job. It was just in the nick of time because I hadn't worked as a park ranger long enough to make much money at all, and switching back and forth between peanut butter sandwiches and mac and cheese wasn't the best way to stave off starvation, but beggars can't be choosers. So I applied for this job and went into the office building in town for the interview. The first question I asked was, "Does it have any strange rules?" The interviewer looked at me like I had just sprouted a second head. "Like, what kinds of rules?" she said. "I don't know. Like, don't answer the phone at a certain time of night, or if you see a glowing orb, look away for 30 seconds. "Are you planning on seeing any glowing orbs inside our warehouse?" she said hesitantly. "I hope not." She held my gaze for a long moment before answering my question. I started to wonder if she was going to kick me out of her office. "To answer your original question," she said, "I don't know of any strange rules for the warehouse. To my knowledge, it's a standard night watchman job. You go there, you make sure no one breaks in and takes anything, and then you go home." That's a relief. Just out of curiosity, why did you ask about strange rules? My last job had some strange rules, and let's just say it didn't end well. "Oh, all right," she said. "I suppose that would be a good question for you to ask then." The rest of the interview was standard stuff. Thankfully, I hadn't blown it and got the job. She gave me my employee packet and the address of the warehouse. She told me I would be trained on the job, when to be there for my first shift, and the name of my supervisor, Mr. Larson. I thanked her and went on my merry way, happy to have a job that was easy and paid decently. The next couple of days went by slowly as anticipation built for my first shift. When I got in my car, the gas gauge told me I would be pushing it to make it back and forth to work before I got my first paycheck. I drove to the address and found it in what looked like an abandoned business park. There were other warehouses along the drive with weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement and up the sides of the buildings. There were streetlights, but they looked old and decrepit. Only 2 of them were still emanating their putrid yellow light, fighting a losing battle against the darkness. I came to the end of the road, and looming in front of me was a massive warehouse. The GPS on my phone told me I had arrived, but I wasn't sure I wanted to. It was all by itself, surrounded by woods on all sides except for the notch that had been cut out to make the road. I pulled around to the side where the main door was and was slightly comforted by the car that was parked in front. At least there was some other living soul out here. I got out, taking my bag of supplies with me. I started toward the door and hit the remote button to lock the car out of habit. The horn's chirp echoed through the trees, making me even more aware of their presence. I wasn't looking forward to doing security checks around the perimeter. There was only one security light that I'd seen when I drove up, and it was near the entrance. I approached the door and tried to open it, but it was locked. I looked around for anything and found a keypad. I opened up my email on my phone and read the instructions I'd been sent. Your shift is from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., it read. You cannot leave between those hours. The code for the keypad is your employee code. That way we know it's you inside. I paused. There was something about that last sentence that gave me chills. I reread it and decided it was just a security thing. Your employee code is 2059. It should open any doors you need to access inside. If you have any problems, call or text the number included in your packet. I didn't remember getting any number in my packet, but maybe I'd just skimmed over it. I entered my code on the keypad. The light above the numbers turned green and I heard the lock click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. When the door shut, I heard the lock click again. I stared at it as if the sound had some finality to it. Just out of curiosity, I typed in my code on the inside keypad, but the light stayed red and the door stayed locked. I tried to shrug it off, thinking it was like a time card thing, that it wouldn't open again until 9 a.m. I looked at my watch and it read 9:02 p.m. I turned toward the inside set of doors and punched in my code. The green light and click granted me entry. If I'm going to have to type in my code at every door, it's going to be a long night, I thought. I stepped into what looked like a small reception area. There was a desk and a couple of vinyl couches along the wall. It was sparsely decorated and dimly lit. The only painting I saw on the wall had a picture of a large gate that was dark red with words in some other language. I walked through the first set of doors after inputting my code. They opened up into a long, dimly lit hallway with doors on both sides. The first one I came to said, Security. It was no surprise when I saw a keypad on the door lock. I typed in my code and opened the door. Inside, there was a desk with monitors and a computer. There was also a table with 2 chairs, another vinyl couch, a mini fridge, and a small bathroom. I set my bag down on the couch and got my water bottle out. I opened the fridge and found a lunchbox with a bottle on the door. I guess it belongs to the guard I'm supposed to relieve, I thought. Where is he anyway? I put my bottle in and closed the fridge, then looked around the room more closely. There were 3 doors on the far wall that I hadn't noticed. I opened the first one and found it was a closet. A light jacket hung there, and a small duffel bag sat on the shelf. I sat my bag beside it and closed the door. I opened the second one to find a weapons locker. 2 handguns and 2 shotguns, along with tasers and pepper spray, were locked behind a metal mesh door. I tried the door out of curiosity, but it refused to budge. Surprisingly, there wasn't a keypad to punch in numbers. It was an actual lock. I looked around for the keys, but didn't find them. Maybe the other guard had them. I closed the door and tried to open the third one. It remained locked. Maybe it's a maintenance closet or something. I sat at the desk and looked at the computer. The monitor showed a login screen. I typed in my code and it came up to an email. I had 3 messages. I clicked on the first that read, First Login. I opened it and read, Welcome to your first shift. I'm sure by now you have some questions. First off, you need to log into our Wi-Fi. If you look at your phone, you'll see there's no cell service inside the building. I looked, and sure enough, my phone had no service. I followed the directions to hook up to their Wi-Fi. Once I logged in, a strange symbol flashed on my phone. Then it went blank for a whole minute. I tried to go back or go to the home screen, but nothing happened. I was about to power off when suddenly the screen came back. Everything seemed normal, and I was able to do everything but make calls. My phone dinged as I received a text. "Congratulations on setting up your phone on our corporate Wi-Fi. Calling will be disabled while you're on shift. If you have any needs, text this number. Someone is monitoring 24/7. I saw the number they sent and saved it as corporate. I opened the second email and read the message. Your duties. Monitor for any unusual activity. If there is unusual activity, text corporate immediately. Check to make sure all doors are secure. Do green patrols twice per shift. Do a red patrol once per shift. Do yellow patrols 4 times per shift." I was wondering what that meant when a video started showing the hallway floors that had different color stripes of paint. There was green, yellow, and red, and then there seemed to be another color beside them. Before I could make it out, the video ended. "Take your breaks only in the security room." The email ended. I looked at the subject for the third one and it read, "Open only after the first patrol." I hovered the arrow over the subject and was tempted to click, but just then I got a text. "Have you done your first patrol yet?" it read. Great, I thought. Just what I need is to be nagged at work. "Not yet," I texted back. "Better get to it." I sighed and stepped to the door when my phone dinged. "Don't forget your flashlight." I read it and looked at the closet, realizing I had done just that. I slowly looked back at the phone, thinking many things I'd like to respond, but texted thanks. I went to the closet and got my flashlight out of my bag. I looked at my phone and thought, anything else? Wondering if it would respond. Thankfully, it didn't. My phone literally reading my thoughts would be disturbing beyond belief. I opened the door and glanced at my phone to see if I'd done anything else wrong. It remained, thankfully, silent. I stepped back into the hallway where every third light was lit. I assumed it was the nighttime lighting, and started down the hall looking at the floor. The lines were just like in the video. The fourth line was black. I paused at the ramifications of being guided towards something they didn't want me to check on. That either meant they didn't care about it or didn't trust me to check it out. Either one was disconcerting. I decided to get a yellow patrol out of the way. I followed the line down the hall, glancing at each door that was marked with a letter and a number. The first one said A1. The next said A2. As I continued, the letter remained the same as the numbers increased. Odd numbers on the right side doors, even on the left. I reached the end of the hall, and the yellow and green lines turned right down another hallway. The red and black went left. I glanced left, but stayed right. My curiosity would have to wait until later. I followed the lines down the next hall and read the first door. It said B1. This continued down the entire hall just like the first. At the end, the green line turned left while the yellow went right. This hall started with C1. The entire time I'd been walking there was total silence. There wasn't even the sound of air conditioners or anything. It was eerie. I stopped and looked around. The hallway and all the doors were pristine. There wasn't a bit of dirt or dust. It didn't look like a warehouse, at least not like I thought the inside of a warehouse would look. This was something else. I would have to make a list of questions to ask when I got back to the security room. I continued my round and followed the yellow line as it turned right yet again. This hall started with D1. When I reached the end of the hall, the line dead-ended at a door. I hesitated for a moment before opening it into another hall. I turned and looked at the other side of the door. It said A1. I looked to the left and saw the security room. The yellow line had taken me in a circle, or I suppose it would have been a square. I shook my head, stepped into the security room, and sat down at the computer. The email sat waiting. I clicked it. "Congratulations on your first patrol." I read the sentence and felt uneasy at the word successful. Why wouldn't it be successful? I thought. By now you probably have some questions. Perhaps we can answer them before you ask. First, the black line. Do not follow it under any circumstances. Second, as I'm sure you've already noticed, you cannot leave until your shift is over. Third, make sure you close any door you open. These are some basic rules. There'll be more as your shift commences. I looked for any more emails, but there were none. Great, I thought. More rules! At least these ones aren't all weird and creepy. I opened the mini fridge and took a drink from my water bottle. As I put it back, I glanced at the lunchbox and wondered where the other guard was. I checked my watch and it was almost 10. I figured I should do my first green line patrol. I went back out into the hallway and followed the green line to the point where it veered away from the yellow. The silence in the hall was starting to bother me. Listening to my own footsteps was unnerving. The green line led to another similar corridor. This one was E Hall. I was starting to wonder just how big this place was when I heard a sound I didn't make. I slowly turned and looked back to find an open door. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt it wasn't open when I went past it. I shone my flashlight around looking for anything and anyone, but nothing was there. I approached the door and was about to close it and resume my patrol when I heard the sound again. My hand hovered over the knob as my curiosity overwhelmed my fear and common sense. Instead of shutting the door and moving on, I opened it enough to look inside. The room was dark. I considered turning on the light, but instead opted to use my flashlight. I shone it around the room that looked like a lab, with plenty of workstations. I did a slow lap around the room looking for anything out of the ordinary, which was laughable because I had no idea what went on in this room or this building on a day-to-day basis. So how would I know what was normal for this place? In the middle of my lap, I noticed a dim light underneath a door at the far end of the room. I slowly approached it, turned the knob, and peeked inside. I wish I hadn't. There was a large glowing glass container that held an entity is the only thing I can think to call it. I know if I call it what I think it should be called, I'll go insane right on the spot. It was easily the size of a large human and then some. It was black and covered with what I could only describe as scales. There were sharp points sticking out of its elbows, knees, and seemingly random spots along its head and torso. Its face was a nightmare, with horns sticking out of its forehead and curling up like a ram's. It was hovering inside the container somehow, even though there was no liquid inside it, and holding its legs, making it look like it was curled up in the fetal position. I kept the flashlight down so as not to risk disturbing this thing. I panned around the room. There seemed to be controls of some sort near the container that were making occasional hissing sounds. It was as if the machine was breathing for it. How I kept from screaming and running out of the room, I don't know. Through some miracle, I kept it together and slowly backed away. I held the doorknob, turned, then slowly released it once the door was closed. I breathed a sigh of relief and started toward the door that led to the hallway. I was almost there when I heard the soft scuffle of a foot on the floor. I froze and turned back to the room, panning slowly with my light. At first, I didn't see anything, and then a tiny pale hand reached up and turned the knob that led into the monster's room. I didn't want to know what was doing it. I just wanted it to stop. After a quick rundown of potential outcomes, I settled on getting out of that room as quietly as possible. I stepped toward the hallway door while shooting furtive glances back at the other door that was slowly opening. I could see the creature in its container and the thing that had opened the door. It was small, only a few feet tall, with gangly legs and arms. But what froze my blood was seeing its face. It was embedded in its torso. 2 eyes and a mouth full of sharp, grinning teeth were right there where its belly should have been. It had no head. It was like someone had smashed all but a few inches of this creature's torso and left the face right there. It looked at me, and its horrific smile grew as it reached the controls in the room. I backed out into the hallway and closed the door, quietly, then ran as I followed the green line to its ending underneath a door. I hesitated to open that door with my new knowledge that there were potentially dangerous creatures lurking behind every opening. Finally, I turned the knob and peeked out into a hallway. The first thing I saw was 4 lines on the floor, which told me I was once again in the first hall. I looked at the number on the door. It read A2. I jumped out and slammed the door shut, diving into the security room and shutting that door as well. I leaned against it for a long moment, wondering how I was going to do another patrol, knowing that either or both of those creatures would be stalking the hallways. My attention was grabbed by one of the monitors. There were over a dozen images being transmitted onto different sections of a large TV. I looked at the videos for the first time and noticed there wasn't a single camera aimed at the outside of the building. They were all inside. My breath caught in my throat. That means they aren't afraid of what's outside, but what's inside. I watched the monitors. Fortunately, they were in color. I focused on the cameras that showed green lines on the floor and waited to see if any of the doors opened. After 30 minutes, I hadn't seen any movement. I sat back in my chair feeling a little better. I decided to do another yellow patrol. I didn't want to. I would have rather stayed in the security room for the rest of my shift, but that wasn't an option. I comforted myself with the thought that I'd been watching the cameras and nothing had moved. It wasn't much comfort. I picked up my flashlight, trying to keep it steady as my shaking hands showed my hesitation. I stepped through the security room door and out into the hallway. Somehow it looked different now. Before, when I was just checking a bunch of doors, I convinced myself that nothing of interest was in any of the rooms. Now I knew better. Now I looked at each room as if it were about to spring open, and I shook the thoughts away. I had to, or I wouldn't take another step. I walked down the first hall, ears attuned to any sound. At my first turn, all I heard were my own footsteps. Even they gave me pause and had me whipping around to look behind me from time to time. By the second turn, I was beginning to feel a little less nervous. By the third turn, I was almost calm, until I saw where the green line split off from the yellow. I stopped and stared down the green hall, wondering if that thing had slipped out. For an instant, I thought I saw a movement. I shone my light all around but saw nothing. Even so, I picked up the pace for my last hallway and quickly opened the security room door, then closed it, feeling my heart racing. I looked at my watch and it was nearly midnight. I'd done 3 of my 7 patrols. My phone dinged. There was a text. "It's nearly midnight," it said. I wanted to reply sarcastically, but thought better of it. What's special about midnight? Didn't they tell you? Tell me what? The rules. My heart hammered in my chest. Not again. They told me I couldn't leave before my shift was over and to do different color patrols. That's not the rules I'm talking about. I knew it before the text came. Do I want to know what they are? I texted. You need to. What if I just sit in the security room? There wasn't an immediate text back. There are things that would happen. Like what? Like things that would destroy you, or at least your mind. I sighed. So, send me the list of rules. I shook my head in disbelief that I was doing this crap again. 1. At midnight, you must be in the security office and stay there until 12:30 a.m. No matter what you see or hear, you must stay in the office and don't open the door for any reason. That doesn't sound ominous at all, I texted. 2. When doing a patrol, if you hear someone calling to you or screaming, ignore it. Do not attempt to find the source of the sound. 3. If the doors start changing, follow the lines back to the security room. That should actually take care of you for now. Just remember, do not follow the black line, and don't go into any rooms. Are you kidding me with this? I texted. I don't want to do this again. Let me out. Sorry, not possible. Nothing can open those doors until your shift is over. And what did you mean, again? I worked in a fire tower with weird rules. Interesting. I'd like to hear that story someday. Good luck. Thanks a lot. By the way, where's the key to the weapons locker? Just in case. Didn't the guard you relieved give it to you? I haven't seen him. That's not good news. Is there a spare key somewhere? No return text came. Hello? Is there a spare key? No response. I checked my watch, and it was 12:01. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. I took a step toward it before I remembered the rules I'd been texted. The knocking became more insistent. Next, the doorknob began rattling as if someone was trying to tear it out of the door. "Who's there?" I said, cringing at my own words. The doorknob stopped rattling. There was a silence that was only broken by the pounding of my own heartbeat. "It's Mr. Larson," a voice said. "I've misplaced my key. Could you please let me in?" I took another step and reached for the doorknob. When I remembered. "There's a keypad on the door," I said. "If you are who you say you are, just punch your code in and the door will open." There was silence on the other side of the door. It lasted so long that I wondered if whoever it was had gone away. I leaned against the door and put my ear up to it. That's when I heard the loudest, most blood-curdling, inhuman scream I'd ever heard in my life. I threw myself on the floor, trying to get away from the door as quickly as possible. The pounding continued. I wondered how long the door would hold up and what I would do when whatever it was broke it down. I held my flashlight like a baseball bat, looking all around the room for a better weapon and not finding any. My eyes fell on the weapons locker, wishing I had a key. The door started bowing inward with every blow. It was so bad I got one of the chairs from the break table and wedged it against the doorknob. I stepped back and looked at my handiwork. The ludicrousness of a folding metal chair trying to hold off an assault that was bowing a solid door was enough to make me laugh. I knew it wouldn't last long. Sawdust was raining down on the floor. I considered locking myself in the bathroom, but saved that for a last resort. And then, suddenly, the assault stopped. The last few remnants of sawdust floated to the floor in silence. I gripped the flashlight tighter, not trusting this respite. Sweat dripped from my forehead as I waited for the assault to resume. Nothing happened. I stood there staring at the door, dumbfounded, not knowing what to do next. I glanced at my watch and it said 12:32 a.m. The text said to stay in the office from 12 to 12:30, I thought. Maybe it's okay to go out now. I grasped the doorknob and slowly turned, taking a deep, cleansing breath before pulling it open. I'm not sure what I expected to be there, but what I found was nothing. The hallway looked the same as it had before. No, wait. The lines on the floor, they were wrong. Every other time I came out of the security office, the lines stretched down the hallway to the right, Now they were going to the left. I looked to the right and saw the doors that went to the reception area and eventually the outside doors. This is impossible, I thought, my breathing becoming erratic with panic. I pulled out my phone and texted. The lines are reversed. It took a moment for the response. Did you break any rules? No, I did everything the way you said. Someone was trying to beat down the office door, but I didn't open it. Have you gone in any rooms? No, Wait. On my second round, I found an open door and went inside to check it. Not good. What did you see? Nothing, I lied. Are you sure? I didn't see anything but an empty room. Then why are the lines switched? I have no idea. You're the one who's supposed to know this stuff. Okay, do a yellow line patrol. When you get to the end, instead of going through the door the line ends at, open the first door on your right and go through it. And that'll fix things? Hopefully. What do you mean, hopefully? No return text came. Come on, man, you've got to be kidding me with this. I texted, but still got no response. I looked left, then right, then back at the security room. I sighed and turned left down the hallway, following the lines. It was shortly after my first turn that I noticed a difference. The place was still silent except for my footsteps, but something felt off. It was like I was in a different place, but it looked the same. It was almost like I was walking through a replica of the warehouse, but different. Aside from the fact that I was going in the opposite direction, which defied the laws of physics because this hallway didn't exist, there was something else. I found out what it was when I stopped. My footsteps kept going. I stood there, halfway down the hall, listening to my own footsteps continue on, without me. I looked down and my shoes were still on my feet, so that was some comfort. I stomped my shoe on the floor, but to my surprise, it made no sound. I stared at my shoes as my footsteps rounded the corner and faded. I rushed to catch up, but the sound was gone. I looked down the dimly lit hall before me and saw nothing. My nerves were getting a workout as I resumed my patrol in total silence. My shoes no longer made any sound. I tried stomping again, but nothing happened. When I turned the next corner, I was greeted by the worst sight imaginable. The little thing that had been in the room on my green patrol was standing in the middle of the hall, staring at me and smiling that disturbing grin on its belly. But that wasn't the worst part. Behind him was the black, scaly creature from the glowing container. It stood at least 8 feet high and was breathing smoke. It looked at me and extended wings I didn't know it had. They reached both walls easily. It was also smiling. Neither smile was comforting. I found my feet rooted to the floor and my knees shaking. The smaller creature made a chittering sound as it started toward me, and the larger took its first step. Its foot landed with the force of a jackhammer. The sound was debilitating. I covered my ears as they approached. I turned to run back to where I came from, but somehow, impossibly, the same creatures were approaching from that very hallway. I glanced back and forth at the mirror images of the unearthly threats closing in on me from both sides. I had no choice. I dove into the nearest door and slammed it shut. The pounding began right away. I backed away, but my foot stepped into empty air. I turned to find I was at the top step of a stairway, but only for a moment. Gravity took over and I tumbled down the stairs. Fortunately, there was a landing that kept me from falling the rest of the way. I slowly stood and made sure of my balance while looking around at my new environment. The stairs I had fallen down looked like concrete and had no railings. I glanced over the side at the darkness that seemed to go on forever. It reminded me of the Moria mine staircase in Lord of the Rings. I looked up the stairs at the door that was still under assault, then looked down the stairs that disappeared into darkness. Looking around the room, I saw No other option. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had to go in a room. Sorry, I texted. No response. Come on, don't be like that. Answer me. Nothing. I looked at the phone and it showed. No Wi-Fi signal. Great, I said, hearing the word echo back to me. I sighed and started down the stairs. Fortunately, there was a landing every 30 steps or so. Each landing started the next set of stairs in a different direction. Looking down through the middle of the staircase, I could see them disappear in an elongated square. After a few landings, I found myself thinking the strangest thought. What about the rest of my rounds? The unending stairs didn't answer. As I continued down my squared circle, I found myself getting tired. More than once I stumbled and nearly rolled down the stairs, only catching myself in the nick of time to avoid falling into the abyss. I'd been walking for what felt like hours. I checked my watch and it said 2:22 a.m. I was tired and thirsty. I sat down on a step above a landing and contemplated my non-existent options. I could keep going. I leaned over and looked down at the continuing endless stairs. I could go back. I looked up at the seemingly endless stairs above me, knowing the creatures were somewhere up there, waiting. I wondered if I would be fired for not doing my patrols and if I truly cared. My first hunger pang ripped through my stomach. I know, I said, looking at my belly. The food's somewhere up there. I pointed in some random upward direction, having no idea where the security office was. Out of sheer boredom, I glanced at my now useless phone. For an instant, the Wi-Fi signal showed up, then disappeared. A bolt of hope shot through me. I texted, I got chased into a room by some creatures. I clicked send and waited. The signal stayed dead. I got a beep saying there was a text and excitedly read it, only to find it was the failed to send notification. I tried again with the same results. Over and over I kept trying to send. It was my only option other than continuing down the endless stairway. My phone dinged again, and I prepared to hit resend when a message showed up. It said, "We'll deal with the consequences later. Describe the room to me." I was so overjoyed I kept misspelling words. Dark room, endless stairway. It took 5 tries for it to send, and it was a few minutes until a response got through. Okay, do nothing. Set your phone down and lay perfectly still for 5 minutes. I didn't bother to try repeatedly sending okay. I lay on the platform, I set my phone beside me, and I closed my eyes. I counted out 5 minutes, very slowly, just to be sure I didn't end early. When I opened them, I gasped. I was laying on the floor in the middle of a square room. The pattern on the floor looked like the endless staircase. I stood and walked over to the door. I reached for the doorknob and opened the door very slowly. The hallway appeared to be empty. I stepped tentatively out into the hall and started back following the yellow line. I hoped I was going in the right direction. At the end of the hall, the line turned left. The green line separated off to the right and I stayed with the yellow. One more turn and the yellow line dead-ended at a door. I reached for the knob, then remembered and turned to the right. Opening that door, I peeked through and saw the security room across the hall. I lunged for it and dove back into the relative safety of the office. I went straight to the fridge and grabbed my water bottle, then opened the closet and pulled out my sandwich. I lay on the couch and chugged half the bottle while inhaling my sandwich. It wasn't long until I was asleep. I woke to the sound of my phone dinging. I read the text. "Are you still with us?" "Yes, thanks to you," I texted. "Take a break before you do any more patrols. Way ahead of you." and don't break any more rules. I'll do my absolute best. Trust me. A couple more rules. Really? If you see any more creatures, don't go in a room. Stand on the line and be still. As long as you're on the line, you'll survive. Can they hurt me? Next rule. Yes? The next text didn't come. I set down my phone and set a timer for an hour. I thought he would text the rest by then. I woke an hour later to my phone's alarm. But no text. I tried again and waited but got no response. What do I do now? I looked at my watch and it said 3:47 a.m. Okay, let's evaluate, I said, sitting at the desk in front of the cameras and computer. I have a little over 5 hours left until I can leave this madhouse. I've done 1 green patrol and 3 yellows, so I have 1 each of red, yellow, and green to do yet. There's some kind of monstrous creature roaming the hallways with his deformed sidekick, and I still don't know where the other guard and the keys to the weapon locker are. The laws of reality seem to be subjective and depend greatly on whether or not I open any doors on my patrol. Somehow, I decided to do another patrol. I was more worried that the building itself wouldn't let me out on time if I didn't do all my patrols. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if that was what happened to the guard I was supposed to relieve. If he was sitting on some endless staircase trapped forever because he missed 1 patrol. It wasn't a comforting thought. At this point, it was all that kept me from laying on the couch and sleeping the rest of my shift away. I took another drink and went to the bathroom, then stuck my phone in my pocket, grabbed my flashlight, and headed out the door. When I looked down, I was surprised to see the lines going to the right. Maybe I reset things when I reset the room, I thought. I headed down the hallway, hearing my footsteps once again. I stopped, and the sound of my footsteps stopped as well. It was a comforting return to some normalcy. As I made the first turn, I paused and peeked around the corner to see if any creatures were waiting for me. The hallway seemed empty. I looked at the doors to make sure none were cracked open, waiting for me to pass. They all seemed closed. I was glad I hadn't run across the creatures, but every step I took made me wonder if they were lying in wait for me at the next turn, silently waiting to jump out and do unspeakable things to me. I glanced down at the lines where the red and black went left and the green and yellow went right. There was something on the floor. I bent down and shone my flashlight to get a closer look. There was a small drop of something red. I touched it with my finger, and it smeared on the floor. Whatever it was wasn't dry yet. It hadn't been there long. I brought my finger up to my nose and smelled it. It had a metallic scent. My eyes went wide with the realization. It was blood. I jumped up and looked all around, searching the floor for where it came from. The yellow and green hallway looked clean, but the red and black hallway... I saw another drop 3 feet down the hall. I shone my flashlight at the yellow and green, longing to do a quiet patrol. Then I looked over at the red and black lines that were punctuated with drops of blood every few feet. I sighed and turned left, following the blood and the foreboding red and black lines. My senses went on high alert. I could hear my breathing. I could smell my perspiration as my stress level rose. Every step sounded louder than the one before. Even the doors seemed to somehow menace me. When a light in the ceiling flickered, I froze. Nothing jumped out of a room and dragged me to hell. I paused and took a deep, cleansing breath, then continued my patrol, keeping an eye on the blood on the floor. I came to another turn and checked carefully before stepping into the new hallway. The problem was, it was a fork. The red line went right and the black line went left. The blood followed the black line. I thought back to the repeated warnings not to follow the black line. I remembered being trapped for hours when I disobeyed a rule and went into a room. I stood there at the fork looking at each line in turn, back and forth. It came down to a choice. Obey the rules, follow the red line and play it safe. Disobey the rules, follow the blood, and see if the other guard is hurt. One choice was selfless and the other was selfish. Another thought pushed to the front of the line. I've already broken the rules. True, I was trapped on the stairway to hell for a while and wasn't sure if I'd make it out, but I did. This thought tipped the scales, and I stepped off the red line and onto the black one. The moment I did, I felt a chill. I looked around, but nothing else seemed different. I kept following the trail of blood when the hall got darker. I looked up, and every third light was still lit. It was like something was snuffing out the lights. The chill got more intense to the point where I could see my breath. The doors in this hall were fewer and farther apart, and there were no turns. I looked at the doors to try to figure out how far I'd gone, when I noticed they were blank. I shone my light at a half-dozen doors. Not one of them had a letter, number, or any markings on it. I decided my selflessness had reached its limit. I turned and started back towards the fork where the red line was. I walked for 5 minutes, and the red line was still nowhere in sight. In fact, the chill hadn't gone away either. The drops of blood were still there, though. I broke into a light jog for a few minutes, which soon became a flat-out run. After a few more minutes, I stopped to catch my breath. That's impossible, I thought, realizing even as I thought it, that I had already seen impossible things tonight. Once I was breathing normally again, I decided to break out of this loop. I reached for one of the doors, but it was locked. I tried another, and another. All locked. I pulled out my phone and texted. I'm stuck again. We told you not to follow the black line, the return text said. It sent chills down my spine. How did you know I was following the black line? I only said I was in trouble. We know exactly what you're doing the entire time you've been in the building. Then why didn't you tell me not to follow the black line? We did. You ignored it. So, what do I do now? A single word came back, making me wish I'd never come to this place. Die. As I was still staring at the 3 horrid letters on my phone, I heard a noise behind me. It was just the shuffle of a foot, and I knew I wasn't moving. I looked up, and there stood the hideous creature with no head and its face on its belly. It was staring at me and grinning. I turned to escape the other way, but the massive, scaly creature was standing there, blocking my path. They had me boxed in, and none of the doors would open. I was out of options. The only thing I could think of was the text that told me to stay on the line. I stepped away from the door and out to the middle of the hallway and stood on the black line. As they approached, I could see smiles on each of their grotesque faces. The big one was flexing its claws, and the small one's arms were outstretched as if wanting to give me a hug. But I knew better. They had me, and they knew it. With nothing to lose, I ran towards the smaller one, and right before I got to him, I swung my flashlight with everything I had. It smacked him right in the teeth. I dove over his falling body as he crumpled to the floor. I kept running as hope sprung up in my chest and fueled my escape. It was short-lived as I heard massive wings flapping behind me, and the next thing I knew, claws grabbed my shoulders, tearing through my uniform and into my sides. I tried to escape its grasp, but its grip was like iron. I stumbled and fell to the floor with the weight of that thing landing on top of me. I felt and heard pops in my back as pain raced down my spine. It matched the pain in my face as my skull bounced off the concrete floor on impact. I knew instantly my nose was broken. It released its grasp so its claws could stand on the floor, but it still kept me pinned down. I heard it cackling as it relished in my helplessness. I felt hot liquid run down my back that I hoped wasn't my blood. I tried to break free and squirm my way out of its grip, but it was too strong, and all I ended up doing was causing myself more pain. I felt its claws tearing at my back, ripping cloth and skin. There was nothing I could do. It was digging into my spine. Once there, I was just a piece of meat. Whoever had texted me was right. I was about to die. The rules had finally been my undoing. There was a flash of light and an explosion from behind me. I felt the pressure release as the creature's weight lifted off of me. I wondered at this new development, feeling grateful but cautious as I painfully rolled to my side and attempted to get up. I got as far as my knees when I felt and then heard a presence. I looked, and there stood a man with a uniform on similar to mine, only not as destroyed. He was older than me and looked like he had been through a rough time as well. He had several scratches on his cheek and his uniform was ripped in several places. He also had a bandage on his hand that was red and dripping. I tried to get to my feet but struggled. He helped me up and we stared at each other for a moment. "Mr. Larson, I presume?" I said finally. He looked surprised when I said his name. "Do I know you?" he said. "I'm your new trainee. I just started tonight." "What are you doing out here on the black line?" I saw the blood and followed it to make sure someone was all right. He looked at his hand. "Yeah, got into a bit of a scrap," he said. "We should probably head back before Ugly decides to show up again." "I agree," I said, starting to walk away, but my left leg didn't want to cooperate. I started to fall, but he caught me. "You all right there, son?" "My leg seems to be having a bit of a problem." He grabbed my arm and pulled it over his shoulder. "Let's get you back to the security office and take a look at that." We started back down the hall and within a few minutes came to see the fork where the red line split off. I was never so glad to see anything in my life as that line of paint on the floor. We started to turn back towards the yellow and green lines, but I stopped. "Do you mind if we do a red line patrol?" I said. He looked at me puzzled. "I'd rather have someone with me anyways, and we do have to go all the way back." "Sure thing, kid," he said. We kept going straight on the red line. The farther we went, the more my back seemed to hurt. "Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" I said to keep my mind off the pain. "Shoot." "What is this place?" "Well, now you asked one hell of a question to start out with," he said. "It's hard to explain. Let's just say it's a form of a testing facility." "Testing what?" He seemed to struggle with that for a moment and was silent as we walked. "Testing all sorts of things. Obviously, you've seen some of the more incredible subjects, but there are also simpler tests going on." "Like what?" "Mostly dealing with reactions, how different subjects deal with stimuli." "How do you know so much about this place?" He chuckled. "When you've been here as long as I have, you learn things." Just then a door burst open and 3 ugly troll-looking creatures lumbered toward us. He stopped and tapped his watch, then fiddled with controls for a moment as the trolls advanced on us. Suddenly there was a wave of light, and they froze in place right as they were reaching us. I looked from him to the trolls and back. "That's a handy gadget you have," I said. "When do I get one of those?" He smiled. "Can you keep a secret?" "Sure. I'm technically not supposed to have it, but I find it makes patrols a lot easier." "Nice. Maybe I could borrow it once in a while. If you don't quit after tonight," he said. "That's a mighty big if," I said, feeling the pain getting worse. We continued past the frozen trolls until the red line dead-ended at a door. I reached for it, but he pulled me back. I'm guessing you didn't get all the rules yet. Apparently not. He touched his watch, and a light shone from it onto the door. It had a red X on it. He shone it on the door beside it, and it also showed a red X. The third door showed a green circle. It's this one, he said, opening the door and helping me through it. To my surprise, we came out in the main hallway. I looked at the number on the door and it said A5. We walked down to the security room and I reached for the number pad to enter my code. I stopped and withdrew my hand. Why don't you enter the code? I said. What? Because I'm holding you up so you don't collapse. I painfully reached over and leaned against the wall. I'm good. Go ahead. He looked at me for a very long moment. This isn't a very polite way to treat someone who helped you out. No, it isn't, but I'd still like to see you enter your code. He glared at me with fiery intensity. Is this the way you're going to treat your superiors? Not if they really are my superiors. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to see you punch in your employee code to show me you are who you say you are. Who else would I be? I don't know. Let's find out. He stood there, looking every bit like he wanted to deck me, and then suddenly his expression softened. Good job, kid, he said, then faded away to nothingness. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and punched in my code. The door opened and I found myself once again looking at this room as my place of refuge. I limped into the bathroom and painfully peeled off what was left of my shirt. I wetted some paper towels and tried to pat down the gouges and scrapes on my back. I looked in the mirror at my broken nose and patted it with wet paper towels to get as much of the dried blood as possible. I wasn't looking forward to getting it set, if I ever got out of here alive, that is. As I stepped out of the bathroom, something was different about the room. The weapons locker was open. I stepped over to it and found the metal door hanging, wide open. There was a shotgun and a handgun missing. I didn't want to think about the ramifications of someone being in what should have been the most secure room in the building. Not only that, but taking weapons as well. And the fact that they thought there was enough danger to need the weapons in the first place. I'll admit it would have been nice to have the shotgun on the last patrol, but I grabbed a shotgun and loaded it, then threw some extra rounds in my pants pocket. Then I took a holster and put it on my belt, loading a handgun to put in it. I grabbed a taser and pepper spray as well. It was strange, but being armed didn't make me feel more secure. Maybe it was the fact that I had no idea who had the other guns. I hoped it was my supervisor, but this place had taught me to expect the unexpected. The other difference in the room was the locked door that I had assumed was a maintenance closet. It was open. I chambered around in the shotgun and peeked around the corner into the open door. It was dark. I was tempted to close the door and walk away, but my curiosity wouldn't let me. I turned on the shotgun's flashlight and started through the door. I jumped as my phone dinged, saying I had a text. "Don't go in that room," it read. I stuck the phone in my pocket and continued into the room. The light wasn't much help against the total darkness. I could only see a few feet in front of me. The passageway was cramped. I had to walk a little sideways. Claustrophobia crept up on me and had me fighting off panic as I continued down the tiny corridor. The light from the shotgun didn't do much to stave off the darkness. There was little to see, but it would have been nicer to see it much more brightly. Suddenly, the corridor opened up into a large room. I made sure there weren't any steps to stumble down like before. I flashed the light around, but didn't see much. The room was empty except for something small in the corner. I cautiously started towards it, shooting glances all around as I went. When I got close, I could see it was a small box. There were bars on the front of the small door and fingers were sticking out. "Hello?" said a raspy voice, barely loud enough to hear. "Who are you?" I said. "My name is Kevin Larson. Who are you, and why aren't you wearing a shirt?" I looked down, and sure enough, I forgot to put my shirt back on when I was tending to my wounds. "That's not important. I need to get you out of here." "You can't. They're waiting for someone to rescue me so they can capture them. I'm nothing more than bait." "And I fell for it," I said, looking at the lock that prevented his escape. "Go back and report that I'm missing," the other security guard said. "I did that several hours ago." "And they haven't sent anyone?" "Unless they're invisible, which, for this place, that might not be much of a stretch." "Who are you again?" "I started last night. I'm your new trainee." "You say you started last night?" "Yes." "And you called in that I was missing?" "Yes." "You're not my trainee. You're my replacement." "What do you mean?" "If they haven't come looking for me yet, that means they think I'm gone." Wow. Talk about job security. I kept fiddling with the lock, but it refused to open. "Step back," I said. "What are you going to—" I fired the shotgun at the lock. It hit, but didn't break it. "Stop!" he yelled as I chambered and fired another round. This time the lock broke and came free. I opened the door in time to receive a punch to the jaw. "You idiot! You could have killed me!" He came out of the box and wrapped his hands around my neck. "Get off me!" I yelled, twisting out of his grip. He knocked me to the floor and we rolled around, trading punches. "You're welcome, asshole," I said. "For what? Trying to give me a buckshot milkshake?" I stopped rolling when I heard the sound. It was like a rushing wind coming toward us. "What is that?" I said. He jumped up and ran toward the corridor. "What is it?" I said to his rapidly disappearing back as I ran as best I could behind him. It didn't take long for me to find out. The large creature I'd met last in the back hallway must have had a lot of family because they were all flying toward me. I kicked into high adrenaline gear, running faster than my injured body wanted to. The wave of black wings was almost on me. I turned around long enough to fire a shot at the closest one. I was rewarded by seeing him not only fall, but take a couple of his brothers with him. Encouraged, I fired again, watching 3 more go down. I fired again and again, feeling like I could take them on as I squeezed into the corridor. I aimed one more time, but the gun only clicked. I had fired my last shot and needed to reload. The problem was, I was running backward in a corridor that had no room, and my arms were nearly pinned to my sides. I started hacking at them with the butt of the gun when they got close enough. It wasn't as effective as a buckshot blast, but it still worked. They were almost on me. I felt claws scratch at my head and face. Suddenly I fell backward, onto the floor of the security room. "Help me!" Larson said as he tried to slam the door shut. I had the wind knocked out of me. I stumbled to get up and rolled over to press my weight against the door. They were still holding it open enough that it wouldn't latch. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a shotgun shell. I loaded it and stuck the barrel into the opening. Before I could do anything, it was nearly ripped out of my hands. By some miracle, my finger was already on the trigger. It went off, knocking them back just enough to close the door. He collapsed beside me, breathing hard, and offered his hand. "Now I'll thank you for the rescue." "You're welcome," I said, sitting there, trying to catch my breath. "Not to sound ungrateful, but how did you get in there anyway?" I pointed my thumb over my shoulder. Door was open. He fixed a hard stare at me. "That's impossible." I shrugged. "I don't know what to tell you. I walked in after my last patrol. The door was open and so was the weapons locker." "Was anything missing?" he said, suddenly alarmed. "A shotgun and a handgun." He grabbed my arm and yanked. "We have to go, right now." "Why?" The word was barely out of my mouth when the floor erupted beside me. I jumped up and followed him toward the door. A shotgun blast hit the wall behind me. A chunk of the door blasted out in front of us just before we reached it, causing us to duck. "Who the hell's doing that?" I said. "Oh, come on," a voice said from the other side of the room. "You've forgotten your rescuer already?" I glanced around the corner and saw the fake Larson, aiming a shot at my head. I ducked back just in time as the blast tore a hole in the wall. "Does this kind of thing happen often on night shift?" I said, loading more shells into my shotgun. "Only when you break the rules," he said, fixing me with a pointed glare. "If I would have known this place had all these freaky rules, I never would have taken the job." "Neither would anyone else," he said, peeking around the corner and being rewarded with a shotgun blast nearly hitting him in the face. "I don't get it," I said. "All these rules are stupid." "Maybe we could discuss it when we're safe." I fired off a blast when I saw fake Larson peek around the corner. "And when will that be?" I shouted over the return shot. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for something. He grabbed the shotgun from me and fired. The buckshot pierced the fire extinguisher, instantly filling the room with a cloud of white powder. He grabbed me and dragged me toward the door as the other Larson fired blindly. We fell into the hallway, barely staying upright, coughing powder out of our lungs. I turned and slammed the door shut. "Will that hold him?" I said. "How many more patrols do you have to do?" he said, looking at his watch. "Are you nuts? Why would I do any more patrols with that psycho running around?" "Believe me," he said, looking me in the eyes. "There are worse things than him in this place." I thought for a moment. "I still need to do one yellow and one green. Do you have any more shells for this thing?" I felt in my pocket and pulled out 2 more shotgun shells, then handed them over. I pulled out the handgun and chambered around, then turned on the safety. "Let's go," he said, heading down the hallway. I was still shirtless and feeling the effects of the attack in the black hall, but I did my best to hide the pain and let the adrenaline carry me along. We walked side by side, each alert for anything that might pop out at us. Surprisingly, we made it all the way through a yellow patrol without a problem. I looked at my watch as we emerged back into the main hall near the security room. 8:11, I said. "We better get that last patrol in quick." The first hallway was no problem. When we turned the corner, however, my large, scaly friend made an appearance. I didn't even hesitate. I shot him in the torso, then in the head. He screamed an inhuman shriek and ran the other way. His little buddy took one look at me pointing the gun at him and followed suit. Larson grinned and nodded at me. When he turned the second corner, I couldn't believe my eyes. The floor was suddenly made of lava. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "Okay, I know it looks bad, but stay single file, and whatever you do, stay on the line." He started walking, keeping his feet on the line like a tightrope walker. I followed after him. The heat from the floor was tremendous. I was sweating buckets and didn't even want to think about the consequences of toppling over without a shirt on. We continued as quickly as possible, looking every bit like 2 kids trying to walk the yellow curb on a sidewalk. Right in the middle, I stumbled and lost my balance. I stepped 1 foot into the lava to regain my balance and was instantly rewarded with pain. I screamed in shock and agony. It felt like my foot was literally on fire. I got it back on the line, sucking wind through my teeth, trying to stay on, limping with 1 foot. "You okay?" Larson said. "Define okay," I said. "I'm in some madhouse of a not warehouse with demons and ghostly employees chasing me, and I literally just burned my foot on lava." "I know it's a lot to process," he said, "but we need to keep going. Focus on the job and save going crazy for later." I took a deep breath and immediately began coughing from the fumes. I hopped along, staying on the line as best I could. I was ecstatic when we turned the corner and left the lava behind. I nearly ran over Larson, who had stopped and was staring down the hallway. I was about to ask why he'd stopped when I saw for myself. At the end of the hall stood his doppelganger, and he wasn't alone. There were 5 of them. What do we do?" I said quietly in his ear. He jumped at the sound of my voice so close. I don't know." I looked at my watch, and it said 8:51. "We only have 9 minutes," I said. "Just go straight at him." I ran ahead as fast as I could hobble. They came at me in a crowd. I fired and hit the first one in the knee, taking him out of the fight. I fired again, hitting another in the shoulder, then again hitting his knee. Foe Larson had fired his shotgun at me and thankfully missed, although I did feel a burning in my leg. I would worry about that later. Another shot, another Larson down. I was nearly halfway when his shot hit me in the shoulder. It erupted in pain, but I kept going, shooting down the last of his twins. I fired a shot at Larson and somehow hit him in the chest. He was wobbly but still raised his shotgun and aimed at me. We were close enough now I could tell he would hit me. Suddenly a blast came from behind me. It passed so close I could feel the heat from the buckshot. It hit him in the neck, and he stumbled back. I added my last round into his chest before he could pull the trigger again. He collapsed in a heap, his hand reaching out toward us as we stumbled past, through the door, and out into the main hall. I paused to catch my breath and leaned against the door, checking my watch. 8:58, I announced. We hobbled up to the reception door and stood silently, like two people waiting for an elevator. The daytime staff began arriving and punching in through the door, throwing furtive looks our way as they entered. The last one was the security guard for the day. "What the hell happened to you two?" he said. We looked at each other and laughed as we punched in our numbers and walked out. He stood next to his car, and I stood next to mine. "Will I see you at work tonight?" he said. "Absolutely no way in hell," I said. He smiled and nodded. "Understandable." He got in his car and drove away. I took an extra moment to look around at the building, which looked completely normal from the outside. I breathed in the clean forest air and listened to the birds singing their merry, oblivious song. I got in my car slowly and gingerly, knowing there was no way I could afford to go to the hospital. I hoped I had some gauze and some antibiotic ointment at my dingy apartment. I started my car and hoped I had enough gas to make it home. Driving away from that building was the best feeling. I started wondering if there was any place around here that didn't have some strange rules to protect their weird secrets. I knew I would have to find a job and quickly. Maybe I could do fast food. There's no way anyone could have dark secrets in a burger joint, right? Camping alone can be terrifying, especially when something's hunting you. By Michael Kelso. The screams echoed through the trees. I couldn't tell if they were human or animal. All I knew was they were loud, which meant they were close. As I listened to the high-pitched shrieks, it almost sounded like a couple of people having a shouting match. If I had been at my apartment in town, that's exactly what I would have thought the sound was. But then the pitch changed, and it took on a feral quality. I knew whoever or whatever was making the sound. I wanted nothing to do with them. Thinking you're alone in the wilderness is one thing. It gives a certain freeing feeling like you're so close to nature. But knowing you're alone and hearing the terrifying, nearly indescribable sound sent chills down my spine. I quickly questioned how much longer I would be alone or alive. Did those things know I was here? Were they planning their attack? Or was it just a gathering of something, like a harmless chill session in the woods, in the dead of night? Survival instinct was screaming for me to get out of there as quickly as possible. To hell with the tent and my supplies. Just leave. For a brief moment, I nearly listened. Later, I would wish I had. Fortunately, I hadn't made a fire yet and decided against one now. If by some miracle those things didn't know I was here, a fire would draw them in like flies to, well, something I didn't want to be in. Even though the screaming was all going at a fever pitch, I quietly snuck into my tent and zipped it shut, as if some flimsy material would magically keep at bay whatever beasts were raging out there. Searching through my pack, I found my Swiss Army knife and kept it firm in my grasp as I lay down on my sleeping bag. I didn't dare settle in for the night. Sleeping through being attacked by wild whatevers and torn to shreds can be bad for my health. As I lay there, eyes wide, listening to the horrible shrieks that seemed to come from everywhere, they suddenly stopped. At first, this was a relief, but when the sounds stopped, so did all other noises in the forest. It was as if someone had hit the mute button on all of nature. I heard a loud thumping sound that sounded like drums, beating faster and faster, until I realized it was my heart. Trying to calm myself so I didn't have a heart attack on the spot was a challenge. I tried to think of calm, blue oceans and sunrises, of beautiful things that had nothing to do with the situation I was in. Apparently, I did my job too well. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember waking up in a panic. Jumping up, I looked all around for the beasts that were coming to get me, when all that stared back at me were the contents of my backpack and the four walls of the tent. I allowed myself to take a few deep breaths. It was morning. The sun was up and the birds were singing. I took both of those as good signs. Being alive was a bonus as well. It was decision time. Do I pack up and cut my trip short by 2 days, or do I write off last night's incident as a rare occurrence and not worry about it today, in the daylight, as the sun's rays bathed me in warmth? It's funny how fear manifests itself so much stronger at night. Last night the forest seemed like the most horrifying place I'd ever been. Today it looks like all the beauty of nature is spread out before me. I couldn't imagine anything bad happening in such a picturesque place. As I looked out over the clearing in the woods, I saw a large dark spot that was moving towards me. I dove into my tent and emerged with a pair of binoculars. Peering through them, I saw the spot was a bear, and it was headed my way. So much for nothing bad happening in nature. My plan of action was to hide and hope it went away or turn down another path before it got here. That plan didn't work out so well. Within 15 minutes, I could hear it snuffling around the campsite looking for something to eat. I hoped it wouldn't be eating a fresh camper. The can of bear spray was firmly in my hand with my white knuckles clenching it. Having it was one thing, using it was another. That was my last resort. Spray and run. The sniffing got louder, and I could see the bottom edges of tent being pushed in by a large nose. My knuckles grew a little wider as I followed its progress along the edge and around the tent. And then there was a pause. A dreadful pause. The kind of pause that horrible decisions are born from. I was contemplating my own horrible decision when the sniffing started again, this time leading away from the tent. Breathing a cautiously optimistic sigh of relief, I opened the tent flap just enough to see the bear lumbering off into the woods. Again, I held a silent vote, just like the song said, should I stay or should I go? I'd only been camping up here once before, but I didn't remember it being this dangerous. Maybe I just got lucky last time. Not wanting my luck to run out, I packed up my tent and got ready to leave. The sun was already high in the sky, leaving me just a few hours to hike out what took me a full day to hike in. I looked for bear tracks to see which way it had left, but the ground was so dry there was nothing to see. Crossing my fingers, I headed out on the trail, hoping it had gone some other way. It was easy going, making the terror of last night fade even more. I still kept a wary eye for the bear, though. No use in getting so caught up in nature that I ignore her dangers. After around an hour of walking, I found a large rock on the side of the trail and decided to take a break. Pulling out a granola bar and a bottle of water, I looked around as I snacked. There was a clearing in the woods and a rough path leading to it. It wasn't any official path, just one that happens when a lot of feet go the same way and tramp down the foliage. There was a faint whiff of smoke coming from the clearing, but I couldn't see exactly what was causing it. My curiosity wanted to see what was there, but my common sense said no way. In the end, curiosity fought dirty and said the smoke meant there had been a fire, and the ashes could blow into the trees if the wind picked up and cause a wildfire. It was a good point, even though the wind was uncannily still at that moment. I took a quick look around to make sure the bear wasn't sneaking up on me, then started down the narrow path. The trees blocked out some of the light as I headed down the path toward the clearing, making me literally descend into darkness. It wasn't a good feeling. My eyes darted around, looking for anything out of the ordinary, and I slowed my pace. Then, suddenly, the trees opened up and daylight shone brightly on the clearing and the remnants of a fire with a wisp of smoke still rising. Whoever had made it had been dangerously uncaring about the safety of the woods. The fire sat right in the middle of a patch of grass with no ring of stones surrounding it. My ire rose at the carelessness of this person. I found myself wishing very bad things on them when I noticed something else. There were splotches of red all around the fire. It was like someone had spilled red paint all around. It was strange. Why would someone bring paint out here in the middle of the woods? I stalked around the other side of the fire looking for the answer to this mystery. Unfortunately, I found it. There was something pale sitting just outside the burnt grass of the fire. It was next to a splotch of red. I bent down and moved the grass to see more clearly. Picking it up, I saw. It was a severed human toe. I dropped it and stood up like a shot. The red splotches made sense to me now. They weren't paint. They were blood. A chill ran down my spine. I suddenly felt very alone and surrounded. My eyes darted all around the clearing and into the trees as I did a slow circle, searching for whatever was about to attack. As I searched, I saw the red splotches led off into the woods in the opposite direction of the trail. Curiosity tried to get me to follow, but I told it to shut the hell up and hightailed it out of there, my head on a swivel, searching for threats. Just as I was about to reach the main trail, I literally ran into the bear. I'd been so busy watching behind me for whatever might be chasing me that I didn't see what was right in front of me. It turned to face me, showing its red teeth. Then it stood on its hind legs, dwarfing me, and roared. I wish I'd worn brown pants because I soiled myself in fear. I was so terrified I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed. It dropped back down onto its front legs and approached me, teeth bared. I knew right then it was responsible for the screams and the dismembered toe. The only thing I couldn't figure out was the fire. I'd never heard of bears being able to start a fire. This was unfortunately the last thought going through my head before being eaten. It sniffed and took a step back. If I'd known dropping a load in my pants would save me, I would have done it last night. As I looked into the eyes of my death, it wasn't looking back at me. It was looking past me. I wasn't sure what kind of trick this bear was pulling. It wasn't like it had to fool me or anything. It had me dead to rights. Curiosity made me turn and follow the bear's gaze. I instantly regretted it. Standing near the clearing was a monster. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It stood on hind legs, at least 8 feet tall. It had the horns of a deer, but the face looked like a deer's skull with no skin on it. Its shoulders were covered in what looked like a cloak made of another animal's skin. The bear let out a deep growl, full of menace. I took the opportunity to back away and allow the bear a clear path to its adversary. It glanced at me for a moment, then started toward the monster. As soon as it was past me, I dropped my pack and ran down the trail with every ounce of speed I could muster. It didn't matter that my car was miles away. It didn't matter that there was no way I could sprint all the way there without collapsing and having a heart attack. Just then, I heard the fight. The growling, roaring, slashing, knocking trees down fight that would have been awesome to watch from inside a bunker with 2-foot-thick concrete walls. Just me alone without a rocket launcher to defend myself. There was no way I was sticking around. I ran for a solid 10 minutes before the stitch in my side told me I had to at least slow to a walk. I didn't dare stop. I knew I had to keep moving. It was my only chance of surviving by some miracle. The sounds of the fight echoed throughout the trees, making it seem surreal to hear it, then hear it echo back again. It sounded like the fight was slowing down. I hoped it would last a little while longer. Maybe whichever one would forget about me or be too tired to track me down. My walk had become a limp. I was nearly out of energy and had a mile to go to the relative safety of my car. Surely by now I could take it easy. As the thought rolled through my brain, the sounds of the fight ceased. The fading echo was all that remained. I wondered which one had been victorious and comforted myself that the victor was surely enjoying the spoils by feasting on the fallen adversary. But in the back of my mind, unease grew. What if it didn't forget me? What if it was following me right now? I found myself walking a little faster, much to the pain and chagrin of my legs. The silence that fell in the aftermath of the fight was disconcerting. The animals around me had been chattering away. Suddenly falling silent was alarming. I started jogging, each step a new exercise in pain. There was no doubt I was being followed. The footsteps behind me were getting louder by the moment. My car was in sight. I was almost free. The footsteps behind me were very loud now. I knew it was right behind me, but I didn't dare look back. Run. Don't think, just run, my thoughts screamed at me. Even my curiosity had no desire to look back. 10 steps from the car, I dug in my pocket looking for my keys. For a brief, terrifying moment, I couldn't find them. Then I dug a little deeper and came away with my prize. I hit the remote to unlock the car and dove into the driver's seat. The engine had just roared to life when the monster appeared. I threw the car in reverse and stomped on the gas, whipping around and making the monster miss crashing through the windshield. I jammed it into drive and floored it as the monster recovered and started after me. For a long, horrid moment, it seemed to be catching up to me. The road was gravel and had several potholes in it. I found myself swerving to miss the biggest ones so my car wouldn't bottom out. But by doing so, the monster gained ground. It was almost within reach of my rear bumper when I slid sideways onto the main road. Once on the pavement, I floored it and watched with satisfaction as the monster fell behind. I breathed a sigh of relief as I relaxed and settled in for the ride home. It wasn't long until I was pulling into my driveway and parking. My head fell back against the headrest, and I was tempted to take a nap right there, when my nose reminded me of the state of my pants. Walking in empty-handed was a mixed blessing. I'd left hundreds of dollars in equipment behind, but at least I was alive. My shower called to me. I stripped, threw my pants and underwear in the trash, then settled into the longest, most rewarding shower of my life. After drying, I threw on a Metallica t-shirt and a pair of shorts. I came back out to the living room and settled in to watch a movie. Horror was out. I knew I'd have nightmares for weeks about my ordeal. I decided to watch an episode of Wipeout. 3 episodes later, I found my eyelids fighting gravity and exhaustion. Heading to bed, I turned out the lights and stepped up to the living room window. Looking out over the lights of the town, I sighed, seeing the trees of the park far in the distance, and knowing I'd never visit there again. Before I turned toward my bedroom, something caught my eye. It was impossible. I rubbed my eyes to be sure. The monster was creeping out of the woods and coming straight toward my house. As I watched, it looked up and saw me. Our eyes locked. Mine full of fear. Its full of menace. I ran through the house making sure every door and window was locked. After that, I went to my bedstand and pulled out my snub-nosed .38, checking to make sure it was loaded and grabbing a handful of extra bullets, shoving them in my pocket. Running back out to the living room, I looked out my window, but it was gone. Pressing my face against the glass, I searched the front yard, but it wasn't there. For an instant, I wondered if my imagination had been playing tricks on me. I went to the kitchen window and looked into the backyard. It was dark, and I couldn't see much. Reaching for the light switch, I hesitated, not wanting to see it suddenly appear in front of me. But I had to know if this thing was real or not. I would rather that I was going crazy than ever see that thing again. Flicking on the light, I took a half step back. Nothing was there. I scanned the entire backyard, all the way to the woods that bordered my property. Nothing. I shrugged and was about to go to bed when I heard it. My foot stopped on the first step, and I turned back toward the door. Someone or something was scraping against the front door. Feeling like I was in a trance, I was drawn to the door, leaning up to the peephole. I closed my eyes and breathed a silent prayer that nothing would be there. My prayers were answered. There was nothing out there. As tempted as I was to just accept this audible hallucination, my shaking hand reached for the doorknob. The distance between my hand and the door seemed to fade, like one of those scenes in a horror movie where the camera zooms in while going backward. I turned the knob and held my breath while opening the door. Nothing was there. I released a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Looking around, the yard was empty, just the evening mist clinging to the lawn. My imagination had gotten the best of me. I turned to go back inside and saw the door and door frame had long scratches on it. My blood froze. It was real. It was here. It had tracked me down. As terror gripped me, I saw a flash of brown fur an instant before it charged me. In sheer desperation, I fell back into the door just as it hit the doorframe. Its antlers slammed into the frame, sending splinters flying as it struggled to get loose from the destroyed wood. I lay on the door, watching in grim fascination, stunned by the fact that it had missed gouging my eyes by a mere fraction of an inch. The doorway had saved me, the same doorway that was rapidly disappearing under the monster's onslaught. I regained myself and ran. As I darted through the living room, somehow I had the presence of mind to grab the house phone and dial 911 as I headed down the basement steps, slamming the door behind me. 911, what's your emergency? came the lady operator's voice. "I'm being chased by a monster who's trying to kill me," I said, vaulting down the stairs. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "I'm being chased by a monster who is trying to kill me." "Are you talking about a person?" "No. What do you not understand about the word monster?" I shouted. "All right. It's my duty to inform you that prank calls will be reported to the police, and you could face charges." "Fine. Send the cops. Maybe they can fight off the monster long enough to put me in cuffs." The line disconnected. "Son of a," I said as I heard the monster stalking around inside the house. I squeezed myself into the far corner between the wall and the oil tank and tried to be as quiet as possible. Barely breathing, I listened to its measured steps as it crept from room to room. The floorboards complained with loud creaks, telling me this thing weighed considerably more than me. I heard it turn toward the stairs and thought about making a run for the cellar door that led outside when my phone rang. "Hello?" I whisper-screamed, trying to be as quiet as possible. "Is this the person who just dialed 911 about a monster?" "Yes, who is this?" There was a pause as I heard the footsteps change direction. "I'm from another agency," he said. "Could you describe the monster for me?" "So you're from one of those 3-letter agencies that always say they don't spy on our phone calls?" "Could you describe the monster for me?" "It's huge," I whispered. "At least 8 feet tall, covered in fur, and wearing the fur of another animal over its shoulders. Oh, and it has antlers like a deer." I heard a sharp intake of air. "Where is it?" I gave him my address. "I mean, where is it in the house?" "It's on the 1st floor, and I'm in the basement," I whispered. "But I think it's coming down here." Just then I heard the basement door open. "Gotta go," I whispered, then hung up the phone. The basement stairs groaned under the weight. I hoped that the wood would collapse under the weight and it would fall, snapping its neck. No such luck. The stairs creaked as it continued to the bottom. I had to duck in this basement, so I was sure it was on all fours to keep from getting tangled in the rafters. My heart pounded. I struggled to keep my breathing quiet so I wouldn't give away my position. The chuffing of the monster's breathing was getting closer. I wanted to close my eyes, but had to know when it came close enough. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gun, aiming it at the corner. I waited. The skeletal snout appeared, but I didn't shoot. The shot would just bounce off the bone. I wanted to hit something more vital and hope that I might somehow survive. The rest of the bony skull made its appearance and went by without noticing me. Next came the neck and the rest of the body. I wasn't sure where this thing's vital organs were, so I held off, hoping that it might not notice me at all. Those hopes were dashed when it sniffed, then whipped around and stared right at me. I took that as a sign to shoot it in the chest. The gunshot was deafening, especially in such a closed space. My ears were ringing so loud I could barely hear the monster screaming and tearing my oil tank limb from limb, trying to get to me. I fired again, trying to hit any part of its body as oil flew from its thrashing. We were both covered in heating oil, and yet it still kept coming. 3 more shots didn't even slow it down. It was so close the muzzle of the gun was nearly touching it. I shoved the barrel into one of its eye sockets and pulled the trigger. The flame from the exploding gunpowder set the oil on fire. I don't know if it was that or the bullet bouncing around in its skull that made it shriek even louder. Flame engulfed its screaming form, making it look like a demon straight from hell. It ran out of the basement through the outside doors, bursting out into the open air and disappearing into the night. I was so relieved I didn't notice right away that I was on fire. The oil had splashed on me and had ignited when the monster caught on fire. I tried to push my way out quickly, but the monster had shoved the tank closer to the wall, pinning me. The fire devoured the oil on my clothes and my bare skin, making me scream in agony as I tried in vain to get away from the fire. This was it. I would die this horrible, agonizing death, trapped in an inferno. The monster would get its revenge and not even know it. Maybe once it extinguished its own fire, it would come back and devour what was left of me, like a well-done steak. I must have been hallucinating. Could have sworn a cloud enveloped me just before I died. I woke in a white room with an annoying beeping sound that wouldn't stop. There was a smiling face in the corner staring back at me, attached to a man I'd never met. "How are you feeling?" he said, stepping over to the hospital bed. "Am I dead?" I rasped. "Not yet," he chuckled. "It was close, though. If we hadn't gotten to you when we did, you'd have been a shish kebab." I tried to lean up, but pain put me back in the bed. "Yeah, you're not going to be taking any hiking trips for a while," he said. "You've got burns all over your legs that'll need some time to heal." "I'm never going hiking again," I said. "Are you the guy I talked to on the phone?" "Yeah. Do you mind telling me the rest of what happened?" he said, pulling out a pen and notepad. "Sure," I said, shrugging. "Since you saved my life, it's the least I can do." He pulled his chair over and got comfortable. "What happened to the monster anyway?" I said. He hesitated. "It got away, didn't it?" "Yeah," he said, lowering his head a little. "We lost the trail after it extinguished itself, but don't worry. We'll find it." I didn't comment on my opinion of the competency of government agencies out of respect for the man who saved my life, but suffice it to say, I wouldn't be sleeping very deeply once I got home. "Where would you like me to start?" I said. "The beginning is always a good place." Bite Me by David O'Hanlon. The rabbit exited the log he'd taken shelter in and kicked at the fleas that had done much the same inside his ear. The bunny stretched, then hopped onto the log. His nose twitched in the adorable way that rabbit noses do. The air was cool and smelled of the previous night's storm. The morning sun caught in the dewdrops, bedazzling the high grass of the meadow. His beady eyes surveyed the land. Parasites be damned, it was a beautiful morning in the Ozarks. Just across the field there was a downward slope that led to a narrow holler rife with tight caves. Berry bushes grew plentifully, and rainwater pooled in the various porous stones. For the small fur-bearers of the forest, it was like hanging out at the mall. The rabbit was only halfway across the field and could already smell the females. He was late to the party, but it was better to be late than belated. A persistent eagle had chased him for over an hour the day before, forcing him out of his normal foraging range. He finally managed to escape at the expense of a squirrel that had been distracted by an acorn. Even in the woods, shit happens. The storm rolled in before the rabbit could get back to the warren, necessitating a night in the log motel. The rabbit knew arriving late wasn't going to hurt his chances any. Aside from the fleas, he was the perfect specimen of rabbit masculinity. He was almost to the safety of the trees when a shadow cast over him from above. Before he could react, the flaming mass struck in front of him. The earth erupted, and the rabbit disappeared, his body becoming indistinguishable from the explosion. His head bounced when it finally came back down and rolled to a stop next to the smoldering crater left by the falling object. His dead eyes stared at the scorched metal and the strange glow of the otherworldly power source that had taken it across the galaxy. And inside the rabbit's ears, The fleas enjoyed their meal next to a romantic, radioactive fire. Several months later, Lila's nails tore through the tent's nylon bottom as she climaxed yet again. Rocco was a terrible boyfriend and a miserable human being, but he was a great lay. With that in mind, she'd suggested they camp in the woods the night before the big reunion, in hopes they could fuck away any relationship tensions that might boil over during the weekend with their former high school clique. Rocco groaned and collapsed on top of her, signaling the end of round 3. Without taking any of his weight off, he reached from the nearby pack of camels and pulled one out with his teeth. "Got a spare?" she asked. "About 10 of them," he replied, tossing the pack into the corner of the tent. Rocco crawled over Lila and unzipped the entrance, freeing the accumulated body heat and pheromones of the last hour. He lit his smoke and discarded the lighter before shuffling out into the humid Arkansas evening. 20 yards away, antenna twitched to life and rose out of the protection of the fossae to take in the chemical stench of sex and CO2. The combination hit the creature's sensory organs, bringing it out of its torpor like a fresh cup of Folgers. Rocco, the last true gentleman, wiped his cock on the tent flap and then walked to the tree line to relieve himself. He took a long pull from the cigarette and thought about the others as his bladder let loose. Every year since high school, they'd gotten together at Hawk's family cabin to brag about their accomplishments, and every year, Rocco had nothing to add to the conversation. He hated those assholes. They wasted their lives being overachievers, and every reunion they tried to make him feel bad, like he was wasting so much potential. As if. He did everything he wanted to without the burden of success. Successful people set expectations that they have to live up to, whereas Rocco just had to live to exceed expectations. Piss spattered his feet, breaking him out of his self-congratulations. He looked down at his bare toes, and something shuffling through the fallen leaves toward him. Rocco redirected the stream in its direction. Whatever it was stopped, but didn't retreat. "Kinky little son of a bitch, aren't you?" he chuckled. The warm fluid rolled down the armored plates to the still stiff limbs of the creature. Its simple eyes zeroed in on the source of the heat. The glowing end of the cigarette could have been an ice cube compared to the bright glow of Rocco's shrinking erection. The creature sprang for cover. Lila scuttled out of the tent in a panic. Rocco's shrill screams drew nearer, and she spun on her hands and knees trying to find out where they were coming from. She finally spotted him. He stumbled wildly with a large, dark object obscuring his crotch like an overzealous censor. The thing fell between his legs, bloated with its first meal. Blood erupted from the swollen, torn flesh volcano that had once been Rocco's penis and showered the foot-long insect. It rolled onto all 6 feet and turned its gaze to the hot, terrified exhalations of Lila. She started to scream, but the creature was too fast. In a single bound, it covered the distance between them and impacted her face with the force of a baseball bat. Teeth flew into the darkness, and the giant flea turned its attention to the blood pooling in the young woman's mouth. The serrated stylets of its mouth plunged into the puddle and through the back of her skull. The next afternoon, "That fucking loser's probably in jail again," Hawk said as he navigated down the steep slope of the holler. "Rocco keeps getting older, but he's never going to grow up. Kara and I are about to open our second dealership. Rocco's still passing around his first demo." "The world needs musicians as much as it needs car salesmen," Danny replied. "His band's called Thundercock," Hawk snorted. "Let's not pretend he's Beethoven." I meant we shouldn't downplay the value of art. Not that he was making any. Thundercock is dog shit, Brian chimed in. But I gotta admit, they're just as good as a lot of mainstream bands. Whitesnake, Danny said curiously. Yeah, they're on that list, Brian replied before noticing his wife had stopped to inspect something in the foliage. Wait, you mean you saw a snake? Brian shivered. The woods are just a part of life when you grow up in Arkansas, but that doesn't mean you have to like everything about them. Ever since an incident in the Scouts when he first came face to face with a copperhead nesting on the side of a tree trunk, Brian had a lurking fear that the scheming serpents constantly surrounded him. Next to that log, Danny told him, a solid white snake. That's no log, Hawk said, pushing past her for a better look. Would it kill y'all to slow down? Kara's thick twang called from the top of the embankment. Take your time, honey, Frank said dismissively. The opaque things slithered under the log when the humans got too close. Danny circled the object and put a hand on her stomach. Revulsion churned her still digesting breakfast like a Cuisinart. The desiccated skin had shrunk back, making the terrifying teeth look even more menacing. There was no blood anywhere. Stranger still, no bugs chewed on the dehydrated flesh. It's a bear, Hawk nearly whispered. Why does it look like that? Danny asked. Dehydration, Brian said as he approached. It's mummified. Revenge of the mummy bear. Bwahahaha, Hawk teased. Come on, man. Mummified? That's why nothing's eating it, Brian informed him. He's bear jerky. Sucks to be him, Hawk shrugged. The lake is calling. The fuck? Something just touched my ankle. The leaves shuffled around them, and something long and white inched along beneath their cover. Then more somethings moved. Brian kicked at the detritus and saw the 6-inch larvae crawling hurriedly toward the shelter of the bear's corpse. Well, that's enough outside for me, he grumbled. Ditto, Danny whispered. What are y'all looking at down there? Kara called as she tried to ease down the decline, but only managed a semi-controlled slide instead. Gosh, did y'all see that? I almost fell right on my keister. Ain't this where we saw all them squirrels last year? The other three looked around at the still trees. The dingbat was right. It had been like a Disney scene when they last visited, with every variety of woodland critter having a block party despite the encroachment of the nuisance of humans. Even Rocco's boombox and his Metallica tape hadn't been enough to disturb them. But this time... Where are all the fucking animals? Brian asked. Danny knelt beside a strangely shaped stone and flipped it over, revealing the bucked teeth. Just like the bear, the jackrabbit had been completely dried out by something. Snap it to a Slim Jim, Hawk said, holding up the dehydrated remains of a raccoon by its tail. What the hell could have done this? Those, Danny finally managed to get out. She pointed unsteadily toward Kara. The dark sclerites that armored their bodies blended in with the rocks jutting from the hillside almost perfectly. One of the insects launched itself at Kara so quickly that it appeared to teleport from its moss-covered perch to the pale skin beneath the ragged hem of Kara's cutoffs. The impact sent her to the ground with a muted squeal. 2 more fleas pounced on her. The cracking of her rib cage sent the others running like a starter pistol. A flea jumped, covering 20 feet in the blink of an eye. It landed between Hawk's broad shoulders and pierced his back, scraping against the scapula with its mouthparts. The former football star tumbled forward and rolled back to his feet. The fall shook the bug loose, but the armored body had protected it from the weight of the human crashing down on top of it. Another flea landed on his chest. Hawk pulled it away before it could bite. He tried to squash it in between his hands, and when that didn't work, opted for headbutting it. The exoskeleton ruptured with a spray of hemolymph across Hawk's face. The flea's forelimbs grappled with the human's wrists. Its hooked feet latched into the muscles and ripped them free from the bone. Hawk dropped the bug and stumbled away. He stared helplessly at the mauled tissue and exposed arteries within. The two fleas leapt at the wounds. Their voracious appetites overpowered the giant human in seconds. Hawk's world spun. His knees wobbled and his vision blurred. He hit the ground hard, but it did not disturb the buffet. Long after everything went dark, he could still hear them slurping noisily at the last drops of his life. Danny didn't know where the hell she was running to, but knew that wherever it was would be better than where they'd been. They'd stumbled into the monster bug's nest. Once they were far enough away, they'd be safe. At least she hoped that was how it worked. She didn't know much about regular insects, let alone 12-inch demon fleas. "Left!" Brian gasped. He slowed to a jog. "Go left!" Danny was breathing too hard to speak. Her legs were on fire. She wanted to stop running, to gather her thoughts, to formulate a plan, but she was convinced every stone and mass of leaves she saw was another one of those damned things. She banked left, jumping over a fallen log, and veered towards something resembling a trail. It is a trail, she realized. 2 years before, they'd ridden Hawk's three-wheelers along the path to an abandoned summer camp on the north end of the lake. They weren't far from the cabin. More importantly, they weren't far from their Jeep. Danny's energy levels surged with her new hopefulness. She ignored the pain and pushed onward, faster than before. After several minutes, the path grew steeper. Her legs couldn't hold up any longer, and she fell forward, but didn't allow it to stop her. She dug her fingers into the earth, crawling along until she could run again, then falling and repeating the process, all the way to safety. She didn't stop until she'd clambered up the steps and onto the front porch. Spots filled Danny's vision as she lay there, choking on the breaths she tried desperately to inhale. It took several minutes until she gained some control over herself and finally sat up. She was alone. Fear flooded her with another burst of adrenaline. "Brian! Brian!" Danny looked around frantically. "Brian, answer me!" He didn't. The woods were as still and dead as that bear had been, as her friends were, as Brian probably was too. Danny climbed to her feet, taking only a few seconds to scan the path for him once more. No one was coming. She threw open the cabin door and ran to their room for the car keys. "He'll be there when you get outside," she told herself. "He's never been a strong runner. He'll catch up by the time you find the keys. He's probably waiting at the Jeep already." She grabbed the rabbit's foot keychain from the nightstand and rolled the soft ornament in her palm. Her dad gave it to her the first day of college. For good luck. "Good luck," she laughed softly. "You had 4 of them, and look what happened to you." Glass broke in the kitchen. Danny stuffed the keys into her shorts and crept stealthily into the hallway. A pan clattered to the floor. She looked around for a weapon, though she wasn't sure exactly what she could use to fight a giant flea. She eased along the wall to the kitchen door. A cabinet banged open. More things crashed. Another cabinet slammed. She took a deep breath and momentarily forgot how to exhale. The bugs didn't have a reason to trash the place, which meant someone or something else was inside. She finally managed to let go of the captive breath and rounded the jam. The scream was unintentional. Kara leaned on the counter, wheezing. Sweat plastered her hair to her face. Bug bites the size of hubcaps oozed from their gaping centers. Kara scratched violently at them, crisscrossing the deep furrows she'd left with earlier attempts. Vomit stained her gory shirt. Her eyes were milky, pus-filled orbs tinged with pink swirls from the internal hemorrhaging. Convulsions racked her body, bringing her to her knees. Danny started toward her, kicking something across the floor. She followed the noise as it rolled. It bumped against the leg of the dining room table. Danny smiled at the yellow can of 612, the insect repellent that had been banned the year before, but Kara insisted it was the only thing that worked against the beefy mosquitoes of Bull Shoals. Apparently it worked on mutant fleas as well. That must have been what Kara was searching for in the... Ah! Kara moaned and clawed at the bite on her chest. She coughed, hacking up crimson phlegm. Stop! Make it stop! Kara banged the inside of her head against the counter. Stop it! She hissed. The banging grew harder, faster. The trim cracked. Spatter decorated the cabinet doors. Kara continued shrieking and moaning like one of the undead. Danny dived for the can of repellent. Kara's screams were punctuated by the frantic strikes of her head against the counter. Then she collapsed. Gray matter pushed through the shards of broken skull to mingle with the other fluids in Kara's matted hair. Danny stretched her sweat-drenched t-shirt over her nose. Fleas carried plagues. She didn't want to believe that's what the bugs were, but there was no denying it. The way they jumped, the way they ate. Giant fleas had attacked them, and if the insects had mutated, then maybe the viruses they carried had as well. She backed out of the kitchen, rubbing the repellent across her exposed areas. She blasted through the front door, then slid to a sudden halt. Everything was quiet, save for the ticking of the tin roof, expanding in the afternoon sun. A childhood memory scratched at the back of her mind, as persistent as any flea bite. She thought about the stray that had wandered into their yard when she was 5. The pup rolled over onto his back for belly rubs, and little Danny had been scarred for life. The fleas were clustered together, turning the dog into their own personal bonanza buffet. She hadn't understood what the little dark specks all over the animal were. Some crawled freely between his stiff, tawny hairs. She probed at a suckling swarm of the parasites. Detecting new prey, they leapt onto Danny's hands. They'd bitten her dozens of times before she managed to get them all off. She had nightmares for months, which had only been quelled once her father explained to her that fleas couldn't survive without an animal to live on. That's why everything was silent, she realized. The sparse populations of black bears and elk were the largest animals in the Ozarks. It wouldn't have taken the monsters long to exhaust those options. There were no viable hosts, so they'd turned to attacking everything they could for even a few drops of warm blood. Danny started off the porch, and the first step squeaked under her weight. It reminded her of a dying animal in the silence surrounding the cabin. She paused. One of the rocks in the yard seemed to move. She blinked the sweat away from her eyes as best she could and watched it for a moment. It was just a rock. She took another step and the stairs gave a relieved groan. She wondered if fleas even had ears. The popping of the roof grew more rapid. She glanced over her shoulder and started running. The encroaching humans had been enough to awaken the entire scratch of super fleas. After months of dormancy, they were desperate for a meal. Any meal. The hot roof made the cabin look like a giant animal to their simplified, heat-sensing eyes. They'd forgotten entirely about the humans that had led them there, and attached themselves to the first hope they'd had for a suitable host. Their piercing stylets punched fruitlessly into the unnatural skin of the house. Starvation was taking its toll on them. One of the weakest slid off the roof and into the yard, its legs curled up to its abdomen as it died without a sound. The others continued working away at the cabin's metal flesh. Danny was almost to the Jeep when the windshield of Hawk's Toyota shattered. The malnourished flea had misjudged its jump and smashed face first into the safety glass. Its lanky hind legs kicked for another go. The sickle-like claws scraped divots into the truck's hood. Another famished flea launched itself from the roof, landing a foot from Danny. She squeezed the bottle of 612, blasting the bugs in the face. It hopped in a circle, toppling wildly over itself, and then bounded into the woods. The incessant pecking of the parasites on the roof stopped in near unison. One after another, they sprang from their perch. Danny stumbled backwards and fell to the ground. She scrambled on all fours, finally getting to her feet, just in time to grab the Jeep's door handle. She threw open the red door, inadvertently batting down an attacking creature. Another landed on her arm. She grabbed its head, mashed her thumb into the thing's eye, and slung it away so quickly that its clawed feet tore through her skin. Danny screamed and fell backwards into the vehicle. The insects swarmed around her. She pulled the door shut, catching one in the jamb. Its armored exoskeleton cracked, but it didn't break. The monster tried to bite. It squirmed and swung its head around. The lancing mouthparts stabbed into the seat repeatedly. Danny leaned back, pulling the door with all her weight. It never made a sound, and somehow that terrified her more than anything else. It should have roared or hissed or made some other horrifying noise like the monster it was. But the thing was completely silent as the two combatants tried to murder one another. Danny reached for the keys and found the pocket empty. The flea inched inside. She quickly pulled the door with both hands again. The windshield cracked in tiny snowflakes. The fleas were striking at her heat signature, fracturing the barrier between themselves and their feast. She was dead, and she knew it. Either her arms were going to tire out, or the windshield was going to shatter. But sooner, rather than later, the fleas would be inside the Jeep with her. Her muscles burned. Danny wondered which would be more painful, a single flea, or the entire scratch latching on at once. She'd probably lose enough blood to pass out in a second or two, if all of them got to her. The canvas roof sagged suddenly. Hooks tore through the top as others searched for another way in. She tried to weigh her options only to find herself without any. The lacerations on her arms leaked down the door panel. The handle started slipping through her grasp. Danny swung the appendage over the entrapped flea and flexed the muscles to speed up the flow. Droplets pelted the monster like crimson rain. It twitched and twisted, trying to find the source of the smell. Driven mad by hunger, it stabbed into its own thorax, chasing a drop of the precious fluid. Danny released enough pressure to kick it to the ground while it was distracted. Before she could slam the door, she saw other fleas descend on it. They ferociously bit into their brethren, trying to get their share of the blood. Danny hit the door locks out of instinct. She crawled into the back of the vehicle to find a weapon. A nylon bag caught her eye while she wrestled the tire iron free. She looked out the plastic back window. Behind the extra gas can, the driveway was a steep hill that banked hard to the right. The fabric tore overhead as more fleas congregated. She could see them through the widening gashes and knew she was almost out of time. They were going to get in through sheer dumb luck when the weight brought the canvas top down. A plan was starting to formulate, but she needed just a little longer to put it into motion. She clambered back to the front and rolled the passenger window down an inch. pressing her wounded arm against the opening. She mashed at the cuts. Blood trickled down the glass in tiny rivulets, but it was more than enough to draw the attention of the ravenous fleas. She cranked the window almost closed, but left enough gap to give them false hope as she smeared the fluid over the upholstery. The parasites fought for space, knocking each other aside and clawing away the more persistent ones for their chance to get into the Jeep. Danny toppled into the back once more. She grabbed the bag and wrestled out an emergency flare. A flea dropped through the roof and scurried onto the back seat. Danny brought the tire iron up, running it through. She swung the spiked end, bug and all, toward the back window and slashed the plastic. She discarded the weapon, watching the flea suckling desperately at its own bodily fluids, oozing down the metal. Danny struck the flare and wedged it into the gas can's handle. She flipped over the back seat and released the parking brake as she moved to the driver's seat. She rubbed her arm across the dashboard. The roof collapsed, and Danny opened the door, letting herself drop backwards out of the rolling vehicle. Fleas sprang onto the fresh blood trail she'd left for them. The Jeep gained speed as it descended the driveway. The starving fleas were too busy stabbing at the instruments and radio in hopes of finding more blood within to notice their predicament. The Jeep missed the turn and jumped a stump, careening into the woods before slamming into a tree. The impact ruptured the gas can. The flare ignited the wave of fuel as it washed over the vehicle. The fleas became fireballs, shooting out of the wreckage. Others were trapped inside the mangled Jeep. Their internal fluids boiled until they exploded from the pressure inside their armored bodies. Danny laughed at the sound of the parasitic popcorn bursting. She'd survived. She'd won. The Jeep's gas tank exploded, rumbling the ground beneath her. She watched the pillar of fire and smoke rise above the treetops. Danny laid back. She'd find the keys to Hawk's truck later. Maybe Rocco and Lila would finally show up, and she wouldn't have to. Or maybe the fire would attract a game warden. That part could wait. 5 minutes before, she was sure she was going to die. She was safe, and she just wanted to spend some time relishing in that. She closed her eyes. Her heart rate was starting to slow down when she heard branches in the trees above. She opened her eyes slowly, looking for the source. A fat squirrel eased out onto a branch, looking down curiously at the human. Danny smiled at the critter and brought her wounded arm up and waved at it. It chittered in response. "Hey there," she said, fighting back the urge to cry. "We made it, little fella." It chittered again. A shadow fell across its furry form. Danny barely processed it before the flea dropped onto the rodent. The stylets punctured the squirrel's neck, effectively decapitating it. The flea drank greedily from the stump, and Danny watched in horror as the plump body shriveled. The slurping let her know the parasite had finished the appetizer. The flea jumped from the branch straight for Danny's prone body. Something boomed, and bits of exoskeleton pelted Danny's body. She rolled over and saw Brian limping toward her with one of Hawk's skeet guns over his shoulder. "Kills on contact," he said. "Oh my God!" Tears welled up in her eyes. "You're alive!" Danny ran to him, throwing her arms around his plump waist and burying her face into his chest. He kissed the top of her head and forced himself to let out a manly chuckle that was harder to believe than giant mutated flies. Danny squeezed him harder, and they both sank to the ground. "I thought they got you," Danny sniffled. "Almost," he whispered. "They wouldn't follow Kara because of all the bug spray she had on, so I followed her back. It was like they couldn't find me in her trail. Then I saw them gathering on the roof, So I hid. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I don't care. I'm just glad you made it. Danny squeezed his chubby face between her hands. That we made it. Yeah, me too. Brian stood and helped her up. I appreciate the romantic fire, honey, but I wish you'd blown up someone else's car. The ground trembled beneath them again. But there hadn't been another explosion. Danny looked around at the rocks dotting the yard, wondering which of them might be hidden bugs. Her eyes flicked to the trees. Nothing was moving. Her hand moved from Brian's side to the double-barreled shotgun. She snatched it from his hand, passing it behind her back to her dominant hand like a majorette. The ground began to pulse and crack. Hey, babe, she said quietly. I think it's time we flee. We Were Hunted by Something Terrifying in the Woods by Michael Kelso. His shoulder was broken, the arm hanging limply at his side like a loose bag of sand. Sweat forced itself out of the pores on his face, and skin peeled off the burns on his hands. It wasn't a good position to be in under the circumstances, and the situation didn't seem likely to improve, but he did have one thing working in his favor. He didn't care if he survived. Are you all right? I asked, cringing at the ludicrousness of the question. He looked up at me, his eyes swollen nearly shut. Yeah, I'm just peachy, he said, sarcasm dripping from every word. Sorry, I just don't know what else to say. Isn't much to say, is there? Unless you want to talk about... No, I said, before he could finish the sentence. Let's talk about how we're going to get you down from here. He leaned over, wincing as he did, and peeked over the side of the cliff. How about you give me a little shove? That should do the trick. Very funny. You know I'm not going to do that. He glared at me. Then maybe I should give you a shove and make things quicker. How about we focus on the positive? You know this only ends one way. If you try to save me, you get killed in the process. Especially with, we don't know that for sure, okay? I said, packing up the supplies we had and trying to form some kind of plan to keep us alive long enough to get to safety. Besides, we've been best friends since what, grade school? If I haven't already been tempted to toss you off a cliff, I'm not going to start now. I stepped over to the edge and glanced down. The wind whipped me in the face, sending a chill through me. Even though it was spring, there was still enough chill in the air to make me shiver. I watched as the sun headed toward the horizon. It would be dark before we got out if I didn't hurry up. My right knee collapsed as he kicked me in the back of the leg. I stumbled, my knees hitting the ground hard, rolling me toward the edge. My hand shot out and grabbed the log, saving me from a horrible death hundreds of feet below. What the hell is wrong with you? I said, lying on the ground and breathing hard. I told you, this only ends one way. Might as well get it over with. I stared at him, not believing what I was hearing. You're serious, I said. I thought you were just being... you. Look at me. I'm in excruciating pain, my shoulder's a mess, I have burns on my hands, and I'm not going to be able to climb down. And even if I could, there's no safety from... We have to try, I said. I didn't bring you here to die. I wish you wouldn't have brought me here at all. There was no way to know this was going to happen. He stared at me. Doubt filled his eyes. I turned away and focused on filling my pack with what I hoped was the right combination of supplies. I couldn't make the pack too heavy because I needed to lower him down and possibly carry him too. I tied together all the rope we had and double-checked the knots. I clipped the carabiner to his climbing rig, checking to make sure it was still intact and the fire hadn't damaged it. I stepped back to admire my handiwork. He was doing the same. Really? He said. This is your big plan? Sure, I said, smiling, proud of myself and my ingenuity. Why not just ring the dinner bell for every predator as you dangle me like a carrot? You know what? You're right, I said. It's not worth all this trouble. I raised my foot and shoved his good arm, sending him toppling over the edge of the cliff. I heard him scream as he fell. Then, silence. Thank God, I said, sighing. I was getting so tired of listening to his whining. I heard that, he said from over the edge. I stepped up and peered over. He was dangling there 10 feet from the top of the ledge. Oh, dang. I thought I killed you, I said, chuckling. He looked up and saw me peeking over. You bastard, he said. Well, isn't that what you wanted, for me to throw you off the cliff? How's that working out for you? He glared daggers at me. Makes you appreciate life when you think you're about to die, doesn't it? I said. You'll pay for this. For saving your life? Okay, I'll take full responsibility for that. I began the long, arduous process of lowering him down. I only hoped I had enough rope. After a while, the strain took its toll. I was exhausted and sweaty. My hands slipped and I had to quickly recover to keep him from smashing into the ground. I managed to slow the rope at the cost of my hands getting severe rope burn. I tied it off to a tree and leaned over to check on him. You okay? I yelled. I couldn't see exactly what he was doing. It looked like he raised his arm, but I couldn't tell. I grabbed my binoculars and peered down only to see he was giving me the finger. Same to you, I yelled. I need to take a breather. Will you be all right for a few minutes? His answer was to slump his head. I guessed he was taking a nap. I sat next to the log and got out a bottle of water, taking a long drink. After a few minutes, I pulled out my knife and cut some strips off the bottom of my shirt, wrapped them around the palms of my hands, and tied them off. Why didn't I think of that before I started lowering him? I thought. I was about to start another session of lowering when I saw the rope vibrating. That's weird, I thought. What are you doing down there? I yelled, stepping to the edge and looking down. My spine turned to ice when I saw nothing. He wasn't there. Adrian! I yelled. No response. Adrian! I yelled again, quickly pushing away thoughts of the Rocky movies. I pulled the rope and it came up with no resistance. I reeled in the entire length and at the end, there was no sign of Adrian. The rope didn't look like it had been cut. It looked like it had been torn or chewed. I stared at it for a long time. Memories of the horrible events that led up to this moment overwhelmed me. I collapsed to the ground in fear. My eyes darted around like my head was on a swivel. Every tree became a hiding place for that thing. I could feel it lurking behind every bush. My mind started replaying when the trouble first started. We made it up to the top of the cliff and celebrated by starting a campfire and making some coffee while we set up our tents. Adrian was actually in a good mood, if you can imagine, and we stayed up by the fire until well after midnight. The following morning, his mood changed. Way to keep me up all night, a-hole, he said, pouring a fresh cup of coffee and looking like he needed it. What are you talking about? Don't play innocent, he said. You know you were hanging around my tent, circling it late last night, growling and pawing at the ground, trying to scare me. My eyes went wide as he talked. I swear, I was in my tent the whole time. I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. Then what was making all that racket? He said with doubt creeping into his eyes. Maybe I was snoring and you heard that. Trust me, this wasn't a snore. Well, if it wasn't me, then I narrowed my eyes at him. Wait a minute. I know what you're doing. What am I doing? He said, looking at his coffee cup. You're trying to scare me with some campfire ghost story, hoping I'll wig out. I'm telling you, It's not some campfire story. It really happened. Yeah, okay, I said, making it clear that I didn't believe a single word. I mean it, he said, starting to get angry. Okay, I said. Don't get your panties in a bunch. You better, he started saying and then stopped. His eyes were focused on something behind me. I'm not falling for that, I said, refusing to look, until I heard a branch snap behind me. I turned around and saw. I shook my head to clear the memory. I don't want to think about that right now, I told myself. I need to focus on finding out what happened to Adrian. I stood and checked my supplies, then double-checked to be sure the rope was securely tied to the tree. I avoided looking around for fear of what might be lurking. Then, once everything was set, I stared down at the deadly ground that waited for me to make a mistake, muttered a quick prayer, then jumped off the cliff. Rappelling down was more difficult with a pack on my back and rags wrapped around my already rope-burned hands. I took it slow, working my way down the same way Adrian had gone. I also went slow for fear of finding what I didn't want to find. I knew it was possible, so I made sure to be as quiet as I could. The rock face was rough, and I did my best not to knock loose any pebbles or do anything that would announce my presence. In a best-case scenario, his rope got frayed on the rocks and broke. I hoped I would find him laying on an outcropping nearby, unconscious, but alive. As I descended, I noticed an opening in the rock wall. My rope was in a straight line with it. I imagined Adrian's rope was, too. I stopped and swung myself over to the rock face, grabbing a bigger rock and pulling myself to it. I pulled my rope up and stashed it, then climbed down the side of the opening. There was a small ledge in front of it that I landed on and peered inside. It was dark as pitch. Even though the sun had just set, it seemed like daylight couldn't penetrate the darkness. I pulled out my flashlight and slowly explored the opening with it. It turned out to be a large cave. I stepped inside and, walking upright, my head easily cleared the ceiling by a good 3 feet. Curiosity overtook me as I shined the light around this newfound hall of mysteries. There were no markings on the walls, and the floor was rough like the cave had formed naturally, instead of by someone making it. But then again, why would someone make a cave halfway up a cliff face, where it's nearly impossible to get to? I wasn't sure I really wanted to know the answer. As I continued inside, the air became cooler. I hugged myself and fought off a chill. This cave was much bigger than I had originally thought. I walked a short distance before I noticed the smell. Actually, it was two smells that intertwined with each other. The first was the smell of fire. Not like a rushing wildfire coming to burn me to a crisp. More like a campfire. The second smell was less encouraging. It was the smell of decay. Some animal had died in here. There was no doubt about it. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if perhaps I had explored far enough. My wondering ceased when I remembered why I was here in the first place. Adrian was still missing. If he had come down here, it didn't seem like he was coerced. At least, I didn't see any sign of drag marks on the ground or a struggle. But then again, it was hard to tell on the rough rock floor. I suddenly stopped, unsure of what to do. The passageway split in two. I shone my light at the right one, and then the left. Neither seemed to show any clue of which was the correct path. I stared at each for a long moment, then mentally flipped a coin, and went right. As soon as I took a few steps, I could feel a strong wind blowing in my face, carrying the smells of fire and rot with it. I nearly backed up and took the other path, but this was where I was most likely to find Adrian. At least, I hoped I would. As I walked, I noticed a slight glow ahead. I turned off my flashlight and followed the ever-increasing light. When I turned the corner, I saw Adrian lying on the ground in front of the fire. He didn't seem to be injured. Well, at least not any more than he already was. I didn't see any blood near him. I did, however, see a pile of bones tossed in the corner behind him. It disturbed me to see the pile and think about my friend's bones eventually laying there. I took a step forward to go check on him, then suddenly stopped. The huge rock that had been sitting by the fire suddenly moved. I recognized it right away from the size and the color of the hair that covered it. I stepped back out of view and began shaking. I knew I only had two options: kill this thing or hide from it. There was nothing in my bag that would kill it. I didn't have a gun with me, and I doubted a pocket knife would do the trick. I had to find somewhere to hide until it left. My mind ran in circles trying to think of a hiding place when it dawned on me. I turned and went back to the other passageway as quietly as I could. Once there, I stepped inside thinking it would be a long cavern like its counterpart. However, it was almost immediately blocked. I shone my flashlight on the blockage and was horrified to find it was piled up with clothes, shirts, pants, shoes, and even the occasional backpack. It was all piled nearly to the ceiling of the cave, and more disturbingly, each article had blood on it. There didn't seem to be any that escaped damage either. Most were ripped or chewed, probably like their unfortunate owners. I remember hearing about hikers going missing in this very park, but I thought it was just the normal stuff like in any other park. People get lost or fall into some hidden crevasse or ravine. I guess not. My mind screamed for me to get out of there, fast, but I needed to know Adrian was okay and somehow try to rescue him. Although at the moment that seemed impossible. The longer I stared at the clothes of these poor, helpless victims, the more it formed into an idea. I grabbed some of the clothes and pushed them aside, digging my way toward the bottom of the seemingly endless pile. I wondered how many missing people it took before a major investigation started. I reached the bottom and took my pack off, setting it beside me. Then I pulled clothes down on top of me, leaving a small space for me to peek through. There was just a hint of light coming from the mouth of the cave, but it was rapidly dwindling. I slowly unzipped all the zippers on my pack so I had easy access without making a sound when I needed something. I settled in and tried to make a comfortable seat out of the clothes. My conscience was not happy using the clothes of murder victims for comfort, but I saw no alternative. If I ran, that thing would hunt me down. It already found us once. I must have been more tired than I thought. Once I settled in, I fell asleep almost immediately. I turned, and it was there. I wasn't even sure what it was. It was dark and hairy. It stood on its back legs but hunched over as if readying for an attack. I was petrified. "Adrian?" I said. "What?" he hissed. "Is that what you heard?" "Yeah, I'm thinking so," he said quietly, barely moving his mouth as if the monster wouldn't attack if you didn't speak. "What do we do?" I said through clenched teeth. "How the hell should I know?" It was circling us and moving closer at the same time. Its sharp teeth dripped with drool. "Did you bring a gun?" I said. "No." "Did you?" I slowly shook my head. It stopped and looked at me as though it understood the whole conversation. It stopped lurching and stood to its full height. It must have been at least 8 feet tall. It lunged at me with incredible speed. I screamed and tried to run, but my foot got caught on the log and I fell over backwards, knocking the wind out of me. In the end, that was a good thing. The monster lunged at my torso, but since I fell, my torso was laying on the ground with the rest of me. It flew through the air, sailing right over me. I looked over at Adrian and saw his pocket knife in his hand. The monster saw it too. It narrowed its eyes at him and snapped its jaws. I was surprised by how much its head and snout reminded me of a dog. This was my thought as I lay there on my back, helpless, unable to breathe. I watched as it lunged at Adrian. I saw him plunge the knife into its chest, and it howled in pain. It never slowed, even as he stabbed it. It merely twisted in the air as it grabbed his arms, pinning them to his side. I heard the crunch as they both landed together on top of Adrian's shoulder. He screamed as they continued to roll right into the fire. Adrian tried to push his way out of the flames, severely burning his hand by grabbing a piece of wood and swinging it in a huge arc, smashing into the face of the monster. It whimpered and growled, then disappeared as quickly and silently as it came. It took me a while to be able to move. When I could, I crawled over to Adrian, who was laying still beside the fire. "Are you okay?" I said, rolling him on his back. He screamed in pain as I rolled him onto his injured shoulder. "Sorry," I said. "Get away from me," he said as I helped him to a sitting position and looked at his burned hand. "Are you all right?" I said. "Yeah, I'm just peachy." I woke with a start, but didn't know why. I reached for my flashlight and was about to turn it on when I heard the sound of sniffing. I froze. Every ounce of concentration was on being as still as possible. The sniffing got louder. I didn't dare even open my eyes for fear it would somehow see them, and that would be it. I could feel its presence getting closer. I fought back the panic that would make me do something stupid like try to run. I just closed my eyes and thought about the last sunrise I had seen, hoping it wouldn't be the last one I would ever see. I felt the snout touch the layer of clothes right in front of me, and then it paused as if it was deciding if it wanted to eat me now or save me for a snack later on. The monster withdrew so silently I barely knew it was gone. I waited for it to return. I knew it was waiting for me to make a move so it could catch me. But I didn't. I sat still as a statue for what seemed like hours. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to move. I had to stretch. I stood and stretched my arms and legs, still quiet. When I sat back down and made sure I was covered by clothes, I risked a little bit of light through my hand to get a bite to eat. Opening a granola bar without making noise is a tedious job at best. It took me a half hour, and after I ate, my only reward was thirst. I sipped on my bottle of water, avoiding the temptation to gulp it down. I didn't know when I would be able to fill it. I checked my watch. It was 1 a.m. At the same time, Adrian had heard the growling. I took a chance that this thing would be out hunting at night. I pushed my layer of clothes off me, grabbed my flashlight, and went to check on Adrian. I stepped carefully and kept my light pointed at the ground just in case. My eyes strained to hear any sounds. Of course, there were the echoes of my own footsteps making me whip around, thinking the monster was right behind me. I made it to the main cave without having a full panic attack. The fire had burned low, and a dull orange glow lit the walls. I found Adrian lying in the same spot as before. He didn't seem to be moving. I leaned down and listened for breathing. I could hear a faint breath. "Adrian," I whispered, shaking him. "Come on, man, we gotta go." He moved a little. "Adrian," I said, looking to be sure it wasn't sneaking up on me. "Adrian, come on." He opened his eyes just a slit and put his hand up to shade his eyes from the light. "You still with me, buddy?" I said. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. "Here, drink a little water." I gave him a few sips, and he perked up a little. "Why?" he rasped. "Why what, buddy? Why are you here? I came to rescue you." "Leave me." "I'm not going to do that." In the distance, I heard a howl. It chilled me to the bone. I wondered how far away it was, and if it was celebrating another victim. Okay, listen, I'm gonna go, but I'll be back when I'm sure it's out of the cave. I gave him another drink. You hang on, okay? He closed his eyes and laid back his head. I stared at him for a moment, then jumped up and ran out of the cave. I turned at the fork and buried myself back under the clothes, turning off the light as soon as I was set. It wasn't 5 minutes later I heard something lumber by in the cave. I had cut it too close. I needed to make mental notes of when it went out. I stole a glance at my watch. It was 1:37 in the morning. I drank the last swallow of water and lay down in my nest of clothes. I woke up some time later. The cave was dimly lit. I could see a bright light coming from the opening, but it didn't penetrate all the way to my nest. I could see the walls near the opening, but not much else. As I watched, a massive shadow blocked my view. It was standing right in front of me. I became still as a stone. What was it doing? Did it know I was there? Was it toying with me? Sweat poured off my brow. I knew I was about to die. I gripped my flashlight tight, knowing that it wouldn't do much to the monster, but at least I'd go down fighting. Something fell on top of me. It wasn't very heavy, so I knew it wasn't the monster. I waited for a long moment until I heard it walk away, before I used the flashlight to see what was on top of me. I shone the light on the pile and found new clothes. There was a shirt, shorts, underwear, and a bra. I knew it was from the monster's latest victim. My heart went out to that poor woman. I wished there was something I could do to help her. But there wasn't. I was barely surviving myself. My water was gone. I had 3 granola bars left, and that was the last of my food. I had to do something before I didn't have the energy to escape. This was my chance. Usually the monster kept to a schedule I assumed governed by hunger and thirst. I knew it wouldn't go out again for hours. I could leave. I could sneak out and be gone without it knowing I was ever here. But I couldn't. I had to rescue Adrian. But why? My mind said. Because he's my friend, I thought. Would he leave you behind? Of course not. He'd be doing exactly what I'm doing now. Really? That's why he tried to trip you and throw you off the cliff? That wasn't real. He was just joking around. He didn't seem like he was joking. He seemed like he wanted to die and to take you with him. He was just upset. How upset do you think he'd be waiting here in this cave to rescue you? Very. He'd probably be wigging out. He never was much for small spaces. Do you think he would have left you by now? Maybe, but the important thing is, I'm not him. You could leave right now. No. Who cares if you save your friend and die in the process? I do. Do you really think that thing doesn't know you're here? What? That thing is playing you. It's stalking you, waiting for you to make a mistake. No, I've outsmarted it. I've learned its routine. Keep thinking that. Maybe you can outsmart its teeth as it's chewing you to pieces. I'm not leaving yet. End of conversation. I waited for a response that never came. Even though I had decided to wait, there were things that still bothered me. Was it toying with me? Did it really not know I was here? Why hadn't it killed Adrian yet? Was it leaving him alive to bait me in? The more I thought about such things, the more I felt panic rising inside me. I pushed the clothes aside and the dull glow shone from the mouth of the cave. It called to me. It told me the coast was clear, that I needed to go right now. I felt my muscles tighten, getting ready to rise and run out of the cave. I pushed the clothes over more, clearing a path, when suddenly I heard something. I quickly and quietly buried myself under the clothes. I had barely stopped moving when I heard the monster lumber through. It paused in front of the clothes, sniffing the air, then turned back toward the mouth of the cave and disappeared. I waited for a full minute before I breathed a sigh of relief. My own ingenuity had nearly gotten me killed. I was sure that thing wouldn't be going back outside for hours, and yet it had left within minutes. I began to doubt myself and my own intelligence for taking such a risk. It was time to leave. I dug out from under the clothes and started for the mouth of the cave. Then I stopped and turned back. I had to try one more time to get Adrian out. I went deeper into the cave, to the main room with the fire pit. There was a freshly made fire, which told me I didn't have much time. Adrian was still lying there beside the fire. I went to him and leaned down. "Time to go, buddy," I whispered. He didn't answer me back. "I know it's going to be tough, but you need to try." I grabbed his shoulders and gently shook him. "Come on, man, you gotta wake up." His eyes didn't open. Something about his shoulders felt wrong, aside from the fact that one of them was either dislocated or broken and should have caused him excruciating pain. He didn't twitch. The other thing was the shoulders felt cold. Not just a little chilly. They were stone cold. "Adrian!" I pressed my fingers against his neck and felt for a pulse. There was nothing. His neck felt cold as well. I pushed him and his body clumsily rolled over onto his back. I tried to move his arms and legs but couldn't. Rigor mortis had already set in. I stared in disbelief. My friend was gone. Not only was my friend gone, but I had wasted all this time trying to rescue him. Maybe I had killed myself in the process. I wiped the tears from my cheeks and pulled Adrian's body back into the same position. My only chance was for this horrible monster not to know I was here. I stood next to the fire, letting the smoke wash over me in the hope that it might somehow cover my scent. After a couple of minutes, I looked back over at my friend, said a silent goodbye, and walked back out of the cave. I stopped at my hiding place and climbed inside, hoping this would be the last time I waited for death to pass by. I settled in and took a nap to prepare for my escape. A short while later, I woke up hearing the monster pass by. I waited. When I thought it was time, I slowly and silently packed my backpack, then stood to leave. As strange as it sounds, I knew I would miss this place. It had been a refuge of safety for the last 2 days, even though it was also a constant reminder of death. I stood at the edge of the pile and tried to rearrange them so that nothing looked amiss. Then I turned toward the mouth of the cave and started making my way out. It was late afternoon and the sun shone brightly in my face, blinding me. I hadn't realized how bright the sun was until I was without it for a couple of days. As I stood at the mouth of the cave, my first problem presented itself. I looked over the edge, and it was a good 50 to 80 feet to the ground. That would be why people left the cave alone. They couldn't get to it. I searched the surroundings, looking for a solution when one presented itself. There were vines hanging from the trees that looked like they might support me. The problem was they weren't in reach. My arm would need to be a foot or so longer. They sat so tantalizingly close that I had to try leaning out to grab one. That ended when I nearly stumbled off the ledge and fell to my death. I searched for any other way, but there was none. I just had to go for it. I backed up a few steps, then took a deep, cleansing breath and ran. I jumped at the last minute and grabbed for the vines. My hands wrapped around them, but I was already falling, and I had to wrap my legs around them too and squeeze for all I was worth to slow my descent. My hands and legs were burning as they slowed me, but I didn't dare scream. The cave was still too close. Even sliding down the vines may have been too loud. My hands were failing. I didn't know how much longer I could hang on. My fingers let go one by one, and I fell. I landed on my back and the backpack cushioned my fall. Fortunately, I had only been around 10 feet from the ground when I did. It still knocked the wind out of me and left me laying there, helpless as I looked back up at the cave opening. Only I could no longer see it. It must have been invisible from ground level. Once I could breathe again, I focused on getting out of here. I stood and tried to get my bearings. The sun was setting, so I knew which way was west. It was around 2 miles to the south where the trailhead was. My car, my salvation, waited there for me. I made my way through the trees and headed south when there was an opening. Before I knew it, I had run across a trail. I stepped onto it, feeling more relieved than I had in days. Then I heard something in the brush behind me. I froze. I turned toward the sound and saw the predator. It was a mountain lion, not the horrible monster I had just escaped, but it didn't matter. If this cat was hungry, I'd be just as dead. I tried to nonchalantly continue walking on the trail, hoping it would lose interest. My walk turned into a power walk, and still, the lion followed. It seemed to be closing the distance between us without breaking into a run. Yet. I tried to remember what to do in case of a mountain lion attack, but all I remembered was, don't run. I thought of this as I power walked away from the pursuing cat that was getting closer by the minute. Suddenly, I was hit from behind. The lion had jumped on me. Fortunately, it had jumped on my pack. Its weight held me down, making me helpless as it climbed up my pack, heading for my neck. I covered my head and neck, hoping to survive. I could feel its hot breath against my fingers. I knew an attack was imminent. And then, it stopped. It lifted its head, and I could hear it sniffing the air. In an instant, it leaped off of me and was gone. I sat up and looked around, not believing my luck, when I noticed the forest had gone silent. The only reason a predator runs away like that is there's a bigger predator in the area, my mind reminded me. I had a very good idea which predator had scared it off. This was it. Fight or flight. I jumped up and ran at a full sprint down the trail. I didn't know I had that much energy left after the last 2 days, but death is a great motivator, and I knew this thing wasn't coming to congratulate me for escaping its lair. My legs burned. I had a stitch in my side. My backpack was throwing off my balance, and I nearly fell. But I could see the trailhead. There was a glint of metal that was on the front bumper of my car. All I had to do was keep going. I could hear panting behind me. My footsteps weren't the only ones running on the trail. It sounds more like a gallop behind me. For a fleeting moment, I almost stopped to see if I was being chased by a horse, but I knew that would be a fatal mistake. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys, pressing the button and unlocking the doors. I didn't want to make the same mistake I'd seen in dozens of horror movies. I was one of the ones screaming the loudest when the victim dropped their keys. I ripped open the driver's door and dove inside. I had just shut it when a nightmare landed on the hood. I stared at it for a moment, transfixed by this horrific apparition. It looked like someone had taken a dog and turned it into a horrible beast. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall. Its fangs were sharp and red. They drooled onto the windshield as the red eyes stared at me. It reached back with its paw and smashed into my windshield, nearly breaking through. I woke from my stupor and started the car as it smashed the windshield again, this time breaking through. It shoved its snout inside and snapped at me as I put the car in reverse and floored it, turning hard and making the beast tumble off to the ground. I threw it into drive and stomped the pedal to the floor. The car lurched forward with rubber screeching in protest. I gained momentum when the monster landed on the roof with a crash. It began pounding over and over. I saw claw marks coming through the metal and into the cloth on the ceiling. In desperation, I began swerving back and forth, trying to shake the monster loose. Metal and rubber protested at the maneuvers with the extra weight on top. I wondered if the car would flip and end my escape in a bloody fashion. So far, the road had been a park drive that was never meant for such speeds. I knew there was a hard turn coming up, and I wouldn't make it as fast as I was driving. I slammed on the brakes, sending the monster flying. I stomped on the gas and swerved around it, continuing to gain speed. As tempting as it was, I knew if I had tried to run it over, my car would never survive. And right now, survival was all that mattered. I looked into the rearview mirror, and impossibly, it was catching up to me. I saw it leap, trying to land on the car again, but I swerved in time, leaving it only asphalt to land on. I made another hard turn, and I was on a state road. The monster followed me, but I was able to get up enough speed to finally escape. I breathed a sigh of relief as I sped toward town. I didn't bother going home. I went straight to the police department. After waiting half an hour to make it to the front desk, I was finally interviewed by an officer. When I started my story, he seemed to be only mildly interested. By the time I was done, there were 6 officers standing around listening. "That was one hell of a story," the officer said, looking around at the other officers, smirking. "It's true," I said. The officer sighed as the others dispersed. "I'm sorry, son. As entertaining as that was, I'm too busy to go chasing around the woods hunting after some urban legend." I took a piece of paper off his notepad and wrote down a series of numbers. "What's this?" he said when I handed it to him. "I had my GPS with me," I said. "Those numbers are the location of the cave that has all the evidence you need. Listen, son, without something concrete, there's no one who's going out to the middle of the woods chasing a fairy tale." "Well, maybe this'll help," I said, getting up and setting up my backpack on his desk. I opened the zippers and dumped clothes out of them. Whoa, what's this?" "Concrete," I said. "These are the clothes of the thing's victims. If you take DNA samples from the sweat and blood on them, you might find matches to some people who've gone missing recently." "You're serious," he said, looking from the clothes to me as if just waking up. "Yes," I said, as I got up and started toward the door. "If it's not too much trouble." I walked out, leaving several officers staring at the pile of clothes. I got into my destroyed car, hoping it would start, and headed home. The entire way, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. After all this, there were 2 things that captured my thoughts. 1, I would be barricading my house as soon as I got home. And 2, I wouldn't be sleeping soundly ever again. I hope you all enjoyed that monstrous march through the wooded lands of your mind's eye as much as I did. Make sure you're subscribed because we have a brand new terror tale coming this Wednesday. And of course, a terrifying and true episode all about the Bennington Triangle this Monday. So go to your favorite podcasting app, click subscribe, and while you're at it, leave us a 5-star rating. It really does make a big difference. I've been Enrique Couto, your host and narrator, and I'll be talking to you very, very soon. And until then, if you're going to go camping, maybe buy a very sturdy tent. Until next time, my spookies.